Asterix and the Magic Carpet. It was around the year 50 B.C. in Gaul, which we now know as France, and the country had been conquered by the famous Roman general Julius Caesar. So now it was entirely occupied by Romans. Entirely? Well, no, not quite. Up to the north of the country, in Armorica, now called Brittany, one small village of indomitable Gaul still refused to surrender. That one little village was stubbornly holding out against the mighty forces of Imperial Rome. They weren't going to be occupied, not if they could help it. You can imagine how it annoyed a powerful commander like Caesar to think he couldn't make that one last little village surrender. He wanted everyone all down the centuries to remember his famous saying, Veni, vidi, vici, which means I came, I saw, I conquered. If he had to say, I came, I saw, and I conquered everyone, except for a village of Gauls who liked making a nuisance of themselves, well, that wasn't going to sound quite so good in the history books. But there was no denying it. The Gauls did like making a nuisance of themselves. Chief nuisance of all to Julius Caesar, though he was a hero to his own people, was the little warrior Asterix. Asterix was shrewd, cunning, and clever, and whenever danger threatened, the village chieftain, Vital Statistics, always turned to him for help. And where Asterix went, his great friend Obelix went too. You couldn't have called Obelix clever. Not really. But what he lacked in brain, he made up in brawn. Brawn, he always insisted, definitely not fat. If he happened to be almost circular in shape, it was just because his muscles grew that way. Fat or not, Obelix was huge and immensely strong. He needed to be strong because his job was carving and delivering the huge standing stones called menhirs that can still be seen in parts of Brittany today. Nobody knows exactly what menhirs were for, but the ancient Gauls seem to have liked them a lot, and Obelix seldom went anywhere without one. He took his faithful hound Dogmatix everywhere, too. Dogmatix was a small black-and-white dog with big ears, and he'd seen a good deal of the world with the Gauls on their perilous missions. Other important people in the village included the druid Getafix, who gathered mistletoe and brewed magic potions. The mistletoe went into the potion, which was his great speciality. If you drank it, it gave you superhuman strength, and superhuman strength came in very handy for fighting Romans. The only trouble was that this superhuman strength wore off after a while. Obelix, however, was an exception. He had fallen in a cauldron full of the potion when he was a baby, and it had a permanent effect on him. Obelix thought it very unfair that he never got a second helping of potion when Getafix was doling it out before yet another punch-up with the Romans. Chief Vital Statistics himself was a fine figure of a man. Brave, hot-tempered, majestic, respected by his men and feared by his enemies. The only person who seemed neither to fear nor respect him much was his wife, Impedimenta, but still she was fond of him in her own way. And finally, there was the village bard Cacophonix. Every village in those days had a bard to compose and perform odes and songs whenever there was anything to celebrate. Cacophonix was ready and willing to play his lyre and sing whenever anybody wanted. His trouble was that nobody ever did want, because he couldn't play or sing in tune to save his life. His performances were deeply unpopular with his fellow villagers. In the story you're about to hear, however, Cacophonix would be called upon to play and sing to save someone else's life, and his conspicuous lack of musical talent was to come in positively useful for once. By now, the Gauls had been holding out against the Romans for so long that both sides were used to the situation. It still annoyed Caesar to think that the garrisons he kept sending to the fortified camps surrounding the village couldn't make any headway, not even with the most modern, streamlined, up-to-date weapons, such as spears and catapults. But somewhere deep down inside, he respected the Gauls as enemies. And they, in their turn, sometimes thought Caesar wasn't such a bad old stick. After all, he did provide them with a lot of fun in the way of battles. There was nothing an ancient Gaul liked so much as getting well primed with magic potion, wading into a brand-new lot of Roman soldiers, and thumping them till they turned tail and ran for it, usually all the way back to Rome. When the Gauls weren't keeping the Romans out of their little village, by helping the Gaulish resistance workers in other parts of the occupied country, Asterix and Obelix, with Dogmatix tagging along, sometimes went on missions to other parts of the world, They'd been to the Olympic Games in Greece. They had visited Hispania, now Spain, and Helvetia, now Switzerland. They'd been to Rome itself, and even across the ocean to a new world where people wore feathers in their hair and hunted birds that made a funny gobbling sound. Not a patch on the Gauls' favourite food of roast wild boar, Obelix thought. In fact, none of these places was a patch on their own little village either, and the heroes were always glad to get home. As a matter of fact, when this story begins, they were lucky to have a home. For quite recently, the Romans had actually burnt the Gaulish village down. Now, you might well think that Julius Caesar would have been really pleased. You might well think it was just what he wanted. But it so happened that the Gauls had been looking after a baby at the time, a very special baby, the son of Caesar himself and the great Queen Cleopatra of Egypt. And Asterix and Obelix had been protecting him from the treacherous Roman Brutus. It was Brutus's men who attacked the village and burnt it to the ground. And when Caesar found out exactly what had happened, he was so grateful to the Gauls for keeping his son safe that he showed he was a good sport and had the village entirely rebuilt. The building work had just been finished, and the villagers were having a banquet to celebrate. Any excuse did for a banquet among the ancient Gauls, who liked their food and drink and a bit of jollification almost as much as they liked thumping Romans. They really did have something to celebrate today, as Chief Vital Statistics was reminding them. Standing on the table, he raised his drinking horn in the air and began to make a speech. "Friends, Gauls, countrymen, lend me your ears," shouted Vital Statistics above all the cheerful noise of merrymaking. "The Romans," he continued, telling everyone what they already knew, "the Romans burnt our village to the ground, but Caesar, ashamed of what they had done, told his men to rebuild it. Well, fair enough. But that doesn't mean we're all square. No, dear friends, the Romans are still our enemies. And so," he yelled at the top of his voice, trying to make the villagers shut up and listen, "and so, I propose a toast to the rebirth of this imposing and magnificent symbol of our resistance to the Roman Empire, and in paying suitable tribute to this, the last bulwark of the liberties of our great Gaulish nation, I say to you now—" Yes, well, it was turning into a very long-winded speech. Vital Statistics liked the sound of his own voice, but nobody else bothered to listen. They just went on with their own conversations. Obelix was tucking into an enormous roast wild boar. He could eat half a dozen or so at a sitting, and thought he might beat his own record today. "You know, Asterix," he said thickly through a mouthful of boar, "I really enjoyed watching the Roman soldiers rebuild our village." "It was pretty good fun," agreed Asterix, "especially when they were going slow with the heavy stones for the hut walls, and you chucked a few menhirs at them to show you could stone wall too." "I say to you now," bellowed Vital Statistics, trying again. "Well, it worked," Obelix pointed out. "The Romans got the job done ahead of schedule, didn't they?" "Fear, my dear Obelix, can be a remarkable stimulus," said Getafix the Druid. Unhygienix, the village fishmonger, was eating wild boar too. Fish seldom featured on the Gaulish banqueting table, for the excellent reason that the fish Unhygienix sold were about as fresh as the bard's songs were tuneful. "Isn't it nice to have brand-new huts to live in?" said the fishmonger happily, to his neighbour Geriatrix. "Oh, yes, I suppose so," said Geriatrix thoughtfully. He was the oldest inhabitant of the village, but in spite of his age he was ready to join in the fighting and banqueting with much younger men. "Oh, yes, they've gone and built it just the same as before. I wouldn't have minded a spot of modern architecture while they were about it. A nice villa in the Gallo-Roman style, for instance. I'd really have fancied a nice villa in the Gallo-Roman style, with columns. Yes, I definitely fancied columns." "Roman columns are a terrible price," said his neighbour at the banqueting table, shaking his head as he topped up his drinking horn from a barrel. "Believe you me, Geriatrix, Roman columns are simply ruinous." Meanwhile, something was worrying Fully Automatics, the village blacksmith. Firstly, he was worried because Cacophonix the bard was usually gagged and tied to a tree before the banquet began to make sure he didn't give him a song, and Fully Automatics had just realised that they'd forgotten to do that today. So secondly, he was worried because this was about the stage of a banquet when Cacophonix would try, unsuccessfully, to tune his lyre and insist on singing. And thirdly, "Well, it's funny," said Fully Automatics, more to himself than anyone else, "but I don't seem to see our bard anywhere. What's he up to now, I wonder?" "Silence while I propose a health!" shrieked Chief Vital Statistics. "I want silence!" And at last he got it. "Right," he said. "I propose a health, and he that would this health deny, down among the legionaries let him lie," sang a loud and frightful voice, very flat, from somewhere overhead. It was, of course, the voice of the bard, and it was coming from his brand-new hut, which was built at the top of a tree, with footholds driven into the trunk so that he could climb up easily. All the villagers dropped their wild boar, their drinking horns, and anything else they happened to be holding, in order to clap their hands to their ears and shut out the awful noise of Cacophonix's song. It was so awful that it even had an adverse effect on the weather. Up till now the Gauls had been enjoying a fine, sunny day. As soon as the bard started singing, however, the sky clouded over and big raindrops began to fall. Cacophonix didn't mind. "Hey down, down, down," he carolled cheerily. The rain was falling in torrents by now, with thunder and lightning, too. "Dee, dee, down," warbled Cacophonix. "And down's the word," yelled the infuriated chieftain, making for the tree-house with an axe in his hand. "You just pipe down, Cacophonix. You pipe down or you come down, house and all." And he began chopping away at the tree-trunk with his axe. "Oh, really?" said the bard, offended. "So I'm not even allowed to try out the acoustics of my new hut, is that it? Philistines! You don't appreciate art. That's your trouble." At least the rain slackened off a bit when he stopped singing. "Try the acoustics, eh?" shouted Vital Statistics, red in the face with fury. "This would try the patience of Tutatis." Tutatis was the principal god of the ancient Gauls. Chop, chop, chop went the axe. "Right," said the chief, chopping grimly away. "I said you come down." The rain had just about stopped. The sky was clearing. And next moment, before Vital Statistics could cut through the tree trunk and bring Cacophonix's beautiful new house to the ground, something did come down. But not the bard. Something, or rather someone. The bard leant out of his window to watch, baffled, and the chief stopped chopping, equally baffled, as this person fell from the now clear sky and landed on his head in the middle of the villagers. Vital Statistics stared. He saw a little man wearing nothing but a white turban, a white loincloth, a white beard, and glasses. The little man was now sitting up and rubbing his head. Nothing like this had ever happened during a banquet before. Who are you?" Chief Vital Statistics finally managed to ask. Where did you come from?" "I'm what's-his-name, the faker," said the little man. He seemed to have recovered from his crash landing quite quickly. "I was flying overhead when I heard the most extraordinary inhuman noises," he explained, "and I became unbalanced and had to crush your party." "Flying?" said Asterix, coming up as the new arrival got to his feet. "Did you say you were flying over our village?" "These fakers are crazy," said Obelix wisely, tapping his forehead. In Obelix's opinion, everyone except the Gauls was crazy. "Of course he's crazy. He fell on his head," Fully Automatics the blacksmith pointed out. "Not for the first time either, judging by that bandage on it," said Unhygienics the fishmonger, who'd never seen a turban before. But next moment, everyone's attention was distracted from the new arrival. Impedimenta, the chief's wife, came up to them carrying something. "Piggy-wig! Piggy-wiggy!" she called. Chief Vital Statistics blushed. He did wish his wife wouldn't use her pet name for him in public. It didn't quite suit the dignity of a Gaulish chieftain. "Look what I've just found outside our front door, Piggy-wiggy," said Impedimenta happily, showing Vital Statistics what she was carrying. It was a carpet. A very handsome red, orange, and yellow carpet, with a beautiful golden fringe. Impedimenta was delighted with it. It was just what she wanted for the brand-new hut the Romans had built for the chief. Someone else was delighted to see it too. What's-his-name, the faker. "My carpet!" he exclaimed happily. "Oh, thank you, madam." His carpet? Impedimenta did not like the sound of that at all. She glared at the stranger. "Who's this?" she asked the others. "What's his name?" "What's his name?" said Asterix. "That's what I'm asking you," said Impedimenta impatiently. "What's his name?" "What's his name? I mean, his name is... What's his name?" Asterix explained hastily, as Impedimenta glared at him this time. She still wasn't quite sure she had got his drift, but next moment her great rival marched up. Old Geriatrix's pretty young wife. The Geriatrixes lived next door to the Vital Statisticses. "I don't see why Impedimenta should have that carpet," she said, appealing to Asterix. "It was as close to our hut as hers." "Oh, no, it wasn't," snapped Impedimenta. "And anyway, I'm the chief's wife." She glared at Mrs. Geriatrix across the beautiful carpet, which was now lying on the ground between them. "Chief's wife? Oh!" snorted Mrs. Geriatrix sarcastically. "So that means you can pinch anything you like, does it? You want to know what I say to the chief's wife?" "Now listen, ladies," began what's-his-name the faker, trying to make peace between them. Neither lady was in the mood for listening. "You and your senile old husband," shouted Impedimenta. "Well, at least he doesn't have to be carried around everywhere," shouted Mrs. Geriatrix, referring to the ceremonial shield on which it was customary for a Gaulish chieftain to be carried. They started slapping each other. Fully Automatics the blacksmith was enjoying the show and started chuckling to himself. Geriatrix, standing beside him, sprang to his wife's aid. Oh, so you think it's funny, do you?" he inquired crossly, bringing his crutch down hard on the blacksmith's foot. "Ouch!" yelled Fully Automatics, blinded by pain for a moment, and swinging his huge fist at the spot where he thought Geriatrix's face would be. Instead, it connected with the face of Unhygienics the fishmonger, who happened to be standing right behind them. "Hey, what's the big idea?" protested the indignant fishmonger. "Take that!" he added, punching Fully Automatics back, and next moment a full-scale fight was going on between the two of them. "Quick, Bacteria!" Unhygienics shouted to his wife. "Fetch me our reserve stocks of last year's fish." Last year's fish made good offensive weapons. Very offensive indeed, if you happen to have a sensitive nose. Before long, the scuffle was a free-for-all, as the rest of the villagers grabbed a fish or so each and joined in. Overhead in his treehouse, the bard struck up another song. "Raindrops keep falling on my head," he sang happily. And they did, or if not on his own head, on everybody else's. It began raining again, as hard as before. The villagers took no notice. Impedimenta and Mrs. Geriatrix went on bashing each other with the fish they had grabbed. The rest of the villagers went on fighting too, except for Getafix the Druid, Asterix and Dogmatics, who all had too much sense to join in a fight over nothing. They stood there watching in surprise as the faker looked up at the rain clouds with delight and sank to his knees in prayer, exclaiming happily, "The gods are with me! I've dropped in on the very village I was looking for." "You have? What village was that?" asked Asterix. "The village of madmen, where a voice makes it rain," explained what's-his-name. The battle between the villagers was still raging, but Cacophonix couldn't remember the next line of his song. He dried up. So did the rain. The faker's answer still didn't make much sense to Getafix the Druid. But why were you looking for our village in particular?" he asked. "It's like this," the faker explained. "I come from a distant eastern country, where I recently met a former Roman legionary, now a merchant. He told me about you Gauls and your famous deeds, and I realized you were exactly what we needed. I've come all this way to ask for your help. It's about something very, very important. But before I tell you any more," added what's-his-name, keeping an eye on the fight for possession of the carpet, "I'll just go and retrieve my property, if I may." Impedimenta and her rival had now unrolled the carpet itself and were standing on it, slamming each other with their fish. "Take this! Take that!" they shouted. "Ladies, ladies, please!" said the faker soothingly. "That carpet is mine, and I can prove it." The ladies stopped bashing each other and turned to face him, united. "This carpet's mine, and I'm not budging," they said in chorus. The faker shrugged his shoulders. "If you say so," he agreed. He sat down on the carpet, crossed his arms, crossed his legs, and seemed to be concentrating very hard. Next moment the carpet began to quiver. Then it rose from the ground, just an inch or so at first, then higher and higher. When it was a few feet up in the air, it took off sideways, almost grazing the heads of Asterix and Getafix in passing, and rising higher all the time. The astonished Gauls stopped fighting and froze, fish raised in mid-air to strike. They stood rooted to the spot, watching the amazing flying carpet. It was right up above the rooftops of the newly built village now, to the astonishment of a passing seagull and the terror of Impedimenta and Mrs. Geriatrix. Forgetting about their quarrel, the two ladies clung to each other for comfort. "Help!" they screamed. "Mummy! Put us down, will you?" they shrieked at what's-his-name, the faker. Recovering from his initial shock, Asterix was watching the flying carpet, fascinated. "How on earth did he do that, Getafix?" he asked the wise druid. Getafix was fascinated too. In fact, he took a professional interest, since magic and spells were very much in his own line, and yet he'd never seen anything quite like this carpet. However, after a little thought, he realized he knew the answer. "These fakers have strange powers, Asterix," he said. "I've heard tell of them before. Apparently they can concentrate hard enough to levitate anything they like." "What does levitate mean?" asked Obelix, making his way out of the chaotic pile of Gauls and joining Asterix and the druid. "It means to raise something in the air," Getafix told him. Asterix was still watching the sky. "Hey, I think the carpet's coming down again," he said. It was. It landed back in the middle of the village with a loud screech as it braked. The two scared and windswept ladies tottered unsteadily off, their quarrel quite forgotten, only too glad to be back on solid land again. Clinging to each other for support, they staggered home together in the friendliest way possible. Meanwhile, the faker quietly rolled his carpet up again. Blinking once or twice to make sure he really had seen what he thought he'd seen, Asterix went over to the faker. "That's an amazing trick," he said. "I wish you'd tell me how it's done. I've never seen anything like it." "Oh, it's all in the day's work for a faker," said what's-his-name modestly. Obelix thought the flying carpet looked great fun. "Ooh, can I have a ride?" he begged. "Do let me have a go on your carpet. It would be great for hunting wild boar, too. I can teach you how to catch wild boar, if you don't know. Give me a ride, and we could have a hunting party. How's that for an offer?" he said hopefully. What's-his-name looked doubtfully at Obelix's enormous bulk. "Rather a stout party for my carpet, I'm afraid. But maybe I'll take you up on it. The carpet or the offer?" asked Asterix in a hurry, anything to stop Obelix being really rude to their visitor, because he was looking deeply offended by the mention of stout parties. "Both," said the faker. "What's the matter with your fat friend? He doesn't seem happy." Fat on top of stout was just too much. You could practically see the puffs of smoke coming out of Obelix's ears by now. "Calm down, Obelix, do," Asterix begged. "What's-his-name's our guest. Don't forget the duties of hospitality." Luckily, at this moment, Chief Vital Statistics got up on his official shield and made an important announcement. "Attention, everybody, please," he shouted. "I'm calling a meeting of the village council at my house. Then our guest can tell us why he has come to our village and what we can do to help him." Obelix had remembered his manners by the time the chief had finished speaking, and turned to lead the way to his house, though it was actually his shield-bearers who did the turning, staggering slightly under the considerable weight of Vital Statistics. The faker followed. Obelix picked up the big roll of carpet and put it over his shoulder. It was nothing compared to the weight of a menhir. "All right, I won't be rude to him, seeing he's a visitor," he reassured Asterix. "Still, I may be stout. I don't say I am, mind you, and I'm certainly not fat. But even if I did happen to be the tiniest bit stout, look how thin he is." And indeed the little faker was very skinny, particularly his bare legs and arms. "If we're talking about the duties of hospitality, don't you think we ought to feed him a few boars?" Obelix suggested. "That's a very good idea, Obelix," said Asterix approvingly. "I say, what's-his-name, are you hungry?" he asked the faker. "It sounds as if you've travelled quite a long way on that carpet. Would you care for a bite to eat?" "No thanks," said what's-his-name. "I had a bite to eat just before I left home." "And when was that?" asked Asterix. "Oh, only 3 weeks ago," what's-his-name told him. There was a mighty crash behind them. Obelix had dropped the carpet and fainted clean away. "Dear me," said the faker. Is your friend unwell? Just overcome by the idea of going 3 weeks without a meal, I expect, said Asterix, fanning Obelix with a hanky to revive him, while Dogmatix helpfully licked his nose. Obelix was soon back on his feet again, and the members of the village council all assembled in the chief's house. What's-his-name, the faker, told them his story. I come from India, he said, from a kingdom which lies in the valley of the river Ganges. Our climate is hot and dry, except for a few months every year, when the rains fall, watering our crops. This rainy period is called the monsoon season. Do you think he's come all this way just to talk about the weather? Asterix whispered to the druid. However, we must have offended the god Indra, god of the waters, what's-his-name went on, because this year's monsoon season will soon be over, and so far we haven't had a drop of rain. Without rain, the crops cannot grow, and soon the dry season will be back, bringing with it famine and hardship for our people. Now our good King Raja Whatsit has a daughter, his only child, the sweet and lovely Princess Orangeade, and the Guru Whodunit, who speaks with the gods. Oh, what? Asked Obelix. Shush, Obelix, don't interrupt our guest, said Getafix. A guru is the leader of a religious sect in India. The Guru Whodunit, who speaks with the gods, what's-his-name went on, decreed that if no rain fell before the end of the monsoon season, in 1,001 hours' time, Princess Orangeade must be sacrificed to appease the divine wrath. Dear me, said Chief Vital Statistics, shocked. What a sad story. Poor princess! But if the Guru's word is law, what's-his-name, and even your Raja doesn't hold the reins of power, I don't quite see how we can help you. Ah, said Getafix, who'd been listening with close attention. I think I do, though. I fancy our visitor wants to borrow Cacophonix the bard. You must have noticed that his singing always seems to make it rain these days. Perhaps it will bring rain even in an Indian summer. That's the idea, said the faker. The ex-legionary I met told me it was simply infallible. Cacophonix was not looking too pleased. You're right, Getafix. I was forgetting our bard has a new string to his lyre these days, Vital Statistics agreed. Very well, faker. We'll lend you our bard. In fact, you can have him, and welcome. No need to sound so pleased about it, muttered Cacophonix. And Asterix and Obelix will go with you too, added Vital Statistics. Spoken like a Gaulish chieftain, said the druid approvingly. Now that's a really generous gesture. Cacophonix was working up a good grievance. How dare you say I make it rain? He inquired indignantly. It's not true. Listen to this. And he twanged his lyre. The rain in Gaul, he howled, falls mainly down the wall. A villager, who happened to be passing the chief's hut, stared in surprise. He thought he could see rain falling on the other side of the window, although it was quite dry on the road outside. Was he dreaming? No, he wasn't. Hey, it's raining down the inside of the wall, cried the indignant voice of Impedimenta inside. Get out of here and take that bard with you, and the faker. Everybody out! Hurry up, I said! Everybody out! And she started throwing things. Next moment, the entire village council, the faker, and even Vital Statistics himself were racing out of the chief's house. Honestly, Cacophonix, said Getafix crossly, you've got water on the brain. Can't you sing about anything else at all? Even Obelix, big as he was on the run from Impedimenta's fury. I don't know what she's grumbling about, he muttered. It's on every Gaulish hut that has running water laid on. You lot don't appreciate me, that's your trouble, said Cacophonix sniffily. He was beginning to feel better about the prospect of going to India. After all, it wasn't so very often that he got a chance to travel abroad himself, although he had once been captured by the Romans and had his big chance to perform in the Circus Maximus in Rome itself. This time, however, he was not going as a prisoner, but to give a special request performance. They really want me in India, he told his friends. Soon preparations for the journey were well underway. The grateful what's-his-name shook hands with Vital Statistics. I promise I'll bring your bard back very soon, he assured the chief, There's no hurry, said Vital Statistics. Cacophonix glowered at him, but Unhygienic stepped in to smooth things over. Your singing will take 'em by storm in India, Cacophonix, he tactfully told the bard. You really think so? Said Cacophonix, preening himself slightly. It'll be a smash hit, said Fully Automatics, as usual. And as usual, he himself had his big hammer ready behind his back, ready to shut Cacophonix up if the bard decided to give them a foretaste of the programme he was planning to perform in India. Meanwhile, Getafix thoughtfully gave Asterix a gourd of magic potion for the journey. You never know, it may come in useful, said the druid. Thanks, Getafix, said Asterix, and looked around for his best friend. Where's Obelix got to, I wonder? Next moment he knew. Obelix, too, would be making preparations for the journey. With a shout of, "Make way there!" he came into view, trundling a cart laden with dozens of wild boar carcasses. What on earth, said the startled Asterix, do you think you're doing with those? Just stocking up with a few in-flight provisions, that's all, said Obelix. We'll need more than a packed lunch for a journey to India, you know. However, what's-his-name, the faker, shook his head. My carpet will never carry all that, Obelix, he said. But don't worry, we can stop off to eat whenever you want. There was nothing for it. What's-his-name was the pilot, so Obelix had to do as he said, although as he boarded the carpet he felt some misgivings. A man who hadn't eaten for 3 weeks on the way to Gaul might not have the same ideas about regular mealtimes en route as he, Obelix, did. All aboard, said the faker. He himself sat at the front of the carpet, arms stretched out in front of him, and started concentrating hard. Cacophonix and Asterix waved goodbye to the assembled villagers, Cacophonix rehearsing the particularly gracious wave he was planning to give the grateful Indians, as they tumultuously applauded his songs. Dogmatics, of course, was on the carpet, too. It had a little trouble taking off this time, weighed down as it was by Obelix, who was still sulking about the boars. But just as Getafix had said, the faker really did have wonderful powers, and soon they were flying steadily over the countryside, off on their long journey to save Princess Orangeade. "Ah, look, Obelix," said Asterix, admiring the view. "Gaul is even more beautiful from above." But the beauties of nature, when they did not include wild boar, left Obelix cold. "I'm hungry," he grumbled. Cacophonix was in high spirits. "I feel inspired now I'm airborne," he announced, and he twanged his lyre. "I will now give you an air on—" "No, Cacophonix, don't," Asterix begged him. "This is no time for singing. If the carpet gets unbalanced, it might let us all down." "Ha! Barbarians!" muttered Cacophonix to himself, joining Obelix in his fit of the sulks. Asterix tried to cheer them up. "What a lovely view," he said brightly, looking down again. "From up here, you can even see the little wild boar gambolling happily about." That stopped Obelix sulking, all right. "Wild boar!" he exclaimed, watering at the mouth. "Where? Where?" And he leant right over the edge of the carpet looking for them. Under his sudden shift of weight, lots of weight, the carpet tilted. It bucketed, it spiraled, it zoomed downwards almost out of control. What's-his-name struggled to hold it steady. "Tell that great fat pachyderm to stop shifting about and keep still," he snapped. "Pachyderm I may be," said Obelix indignantly, "but I am not fat." At last the faker had the carpet under control again. Asterix, who had been unable to do anything but hold tight while it bucketed so alarmingly, now had time to look around him. "And help! Man overboard!" he cried. "We've lost Cacophonix!" Sure enough, Cacophonix was no longer with them. But next moment, to his great relief, Asterix spotted the bard clinging for dear life to the branch of a tree which had broken his fall. "There he is!" cried Asterix. "Down there!" "If the carpet gets unbalanced," he said, muttered the bard indignantly to himself as it swooped lower, but he was thankful to be able to let go of his branch and drop onto it as it passed just beneath him. "Phew! I thought I was never going to see you again," he told his friends. "You know we'd never let you down, Cacophonix." "Oh, sorry," said Asterix, realizing what he'd said just too late. "Pachyderm," Obelix was still muttering. "Huh, pachyderm yourself. I'm hungry too," he repeated. "I think we really had better stop, what's-his-name," Asterix told the faker. "Goodness knows what Obelix might do next if he doesn't get a boar or so inside him. And I think I can see a restaurant down there," He was right. Down below, somewhere in the middle of Gaul, a Gaulish chef was serving 3 customers sitting at a table outside his restaurant with 3 whole roast boar, and boasting of his skill. "Try my wild boar recipe, and then you won't mind even if the sky does fall on your heads," he proudly told them. For it was the traditional fear of all the ancient Gauls that the sky would fall on their heads one day. As he spoke, a shadow passed above. "And the same order for us, please, chef," said a voice overhead. The chef and his customers looked up. "Help!" they shouted. "By Tutatis, the sky is falling on our heads!" And they took to their heels and fled indoors. "Very convenient," said Asterix, as the carpet flew by, low enough for its passengers to snatch up the 3 roast boar in passing. Soon the 3 Gauls and dogmatics were contentedly munching away. Obelix was in a much better mood now. "These new-fangled self-service places are a really good notion, if you ask me," he said happily, scrunching a boar bone. "What about you, what's-his-name?" Asterix asked the pilot. "Wouldn't you like a slice of boar, too?" "No, thank you," said the faker firmly. "I'm an ascetic, and ascetics never eat meat." Obelix looked at him with some concern. "Over 3 weeks, and he still isn't eating," he whispered to Asterix. "If you ask me, he's not normal." But the faker had his mind on more important things, like navigating the carpet. He was not used to the airways in this part of the world, and didn't want to waste time getting lost. Glancing down, he saw what he was looking for. "Ah, good, a Roman camp," he said. "Rome is the first big city on our route, so I'll just make sure we are flying the right way." And he brought the carpet down low again, until he was within hailing distance of a Roman legionary on sentry duty outside a tent. "Hey, is this the way to Rome?" he called. The sentry, as it happened, had been indulging in rather too much Gaulish wine. Discipline was lax in this particular Roman camp. He still had the wine barrel under his arm, and he was hiccuping gently as he stood guard. In his woozy state, he didn't at first notice anything unusual in being addressed from a flying carpet in the air above. You're all going the right way," he told the faker. "Anyway, hike," he added, hiccuping Latin as the Romans tended to. "Anyway, hike, all roads lead to Rome. You can't miss it." "Thanks," the voice called down as the carpet gained height again. The legionary did a double-take, and realized what he had seen and heard, or what he thought he had seen and heard. "Help!" he shrieked, dashing into the tent. A few moments later, he had his head in a tub, while a friend poured buckets of cold water over it. "Well, incautious?" his friend asked him with callous cheerfulness. "Gaulish wine too strong for you, is it?" "Too true," moaned the alarmed legionary. "Talk about pink elephants. I saw worse than pink elephants. I swear I'll never be won over the 8 again." Leaving the Roman legionary and his good resolutions behind, the Gauls and what's-his-name were flying on. It was evening now. "It'll soon be dark," said Asterix. "Where are you going to stop for the night, what's-his-name?" "There's no time to stop," said the faker. "But you can sleep on the carpet," he told his passengers. "It's very comfortable." "Aren't you going to get any sleep yourself?" asked Asterix. "Oh, I'm used to staying awake all night," what's-his-name assured him. "Anyway, being a faker, I can only sleep on a bed of nails." "Asterix," whispered Obelix. "These fakers are—" "Shh!" hissed Asterix. Obelix contented himself with tapping his forehead, by way of giving it as his considered opinion that fakers were crazy. "Besides," added what's-his-name, "there really isn't any time to waste. Don't forget the 1,001 hours and the plight of Princess Orangeade." Meanwhile, far away in the throne-room of a magnificent Indian palace, the beautiful Princess Orangeade herself and her father, the Rajah, were discussing the same subject. "Dearest Orangeade," good Rajah Whatsit was saying, "if the faithful what's-his-name doesn't get back in time with the answer to all our problems, I fear that the infamous guru who done it will carry out his threat, and the people, fearing famine and the wrath of the gods, will support him. Alas, my child, what shall we do?" "Don't worry, father," said Orangeade. She was as good as she was beautiful, and couldn't bear to see the Rajah so upset. That bothered her as much as her own fate if no rain fell. "I trust what's-his-name," she said firmly. I'm sure he'll be back with that Gaulish miracle worker before the 1,001 hours are up, and the guru who done it insists on sacrificing me." A villainous laugh was heard. Ha ha ha! The startled Raja and princess turned to see the evil guru who done it himself standing there. He wore a blue robe embroidered with magic symbols, and with his sallow complexion, pointed nose and chin, and the gleeful look in his cunning eyes, he looked every bit as sinister as he sounded. He was gloating over the royal couple's plight. "Meanwhile, O divine princess," he reminded Orangeade, "half of the 1,001 hours is up already, and it still isn't raining." But though Raja Whatsit was a white-haired little old man, he wasn't afraid to stand up to the wicked whodunit in defence of his beloved daughter. "Wretch," he said indignantly, "we know that the sole aim of your evil plots is to become ruler of this kingdom, once you've disposed of my dear daughter Orangeade, the only true heir to the throne. But you haven't done it yet, whodunit." "I shall, though, just you wait," chuckled whodunit. "It's only a matter of time. Your grief deludes you into wishful thinking, Raja. The god Indra himself revealed his will to me. See that cloudless sky, and the pitiless sun beating down on your whole kingdom? Isn't that a sign that the gods think you are a has-been, Whatsit?" The poor Raja couldn't think of a good reply to this, but Princess Orangeade spoke up bravely. "The gods aren't as cruel as you'd like us all to think, whodunit," she told the guru. "I'm sure they will guide What's-his-name the faker safely back to us, with the Gaulish rainmaker. Before long we shall see them here, the saviours of the people. I expect they're on their way at this very moment." At that very moment, in fact, the saviours of the people were preparing to spend their first night in the air. But something was bothering Obelix. He tossed and turned and couldn't get to sleep. And when Obelix tossed and turned on a flying carpet, nobody else could get to sleep either. "Asterix," he said at last. "Yes," said Asterix patiently. "Asterix, what is a pachyderm?" "Oh, shut up and go to sleep, Obelix," said Asterix. And soon afterwards all three Gauls and dogmatics were asleep, worn out with the day's adventures and the invigorating fresh air. They snored away as the carpet flew on and on through the night, expertly piloted by What's-his-name the faker. When the Gauls woke up, it was broad daylight, and they were flying over the sea. There was nothing to be seen but the blue waves below and the blue sky above. "Where are we now, What's-his-name?" asked Asterix. "We are flying above the Tyrrhenian Sea," the faker told him. The Tyrrhenian Sea was a part of what we now call the Mediterranean. "And soon," What's-his-name went on, "we'll be flying over Italy, then Greece, Mesopotamia, Persia, the valley of the Indus, and finally we shall reach the river Ganges and our destination." "Goodness me," said Asterix admiringly. "How do you manage to find your way so easily?" "Simple," said the faker. "I just do as the carrier pigeons do. It's known as the homing instinct." After a good night's rest, Obelix was feeling hungry again. But remembering that nobody had been particularly pleased with him for saying so the day before, when poor Cacophonix fell off the carpet, he decided to drop a broad hint instead. Picking up the puzzled dogmatics, he said hopefully, "Did a little bow-wow want his din-dins, did-dums then?" "I spy a ship," called Asterix suddenly. He could see through his friend's hints easily enough. "And maybe they'll have din-dins on board for you too, Chubby Chops," he told Obelix. The ship Asterix had spotted was a handsome vessel, with a fearsome face painted on the prow, a great gilded battering ram in front of it, and a yellow and purple striped sail, and the flag it flew was the Skull and Crossbones. Sure enough, the ship belonged to the Gauls' old acquaintances, the pirates, whose vessels they had sunk so many times before, sending their hard-stolen loot, to the bottom of the sea. This time, however, the pirate captain felt sure he was safe from Asterix and Obelix. He wasn't likely to meet any Armorican Gauls from up in the north, not down south here in the middle of the Tyrrhenian Sea. Indeed, as far as he could tell, there wasn't so much as another sail in sight. But he thought he'd better make sure, because he and his men had spent a really successful couple of months at sea, and their ship was stuffed with treasure. "Hey, you up there in the crow's nest!" he called to the pirate on lookout duty at the top of the mainmast. "See any sails at sea?" "Not a blessed sail, Cap'n," the man called down. "It's a vacant sea." "Good, splendid," said the pirate captain, rubbing his hands and chuckling gleefully. "Ha ha ha! Right, me hearties, bring all the loot from this season's piracy up on deck, and we'll have a nice, quiet gloat." Before his men could obey the order, however, the lookout in the crow's nest uttered a sudden cry of terror. I see a sky pilot," stammered the man aloft in the crow's nest. "You see a what?" asked the startled captain. "A sky pilot," called the man in the crow's nest. "Flying a carpet, straight ahead and making for us." Next moment, the incredulous and horrified pirate captain saw it too. The carpet had lost height and was skimming the waves. "Why, if it isn't our dear old friends the pirates!" exclaimed Asterix, delighted, as What's-His-Name landed the carpet neatly on deck. The pirate captain was far from delighted. If he hadn't been able to believe his eyes at the sight of a flying carpet, he could believe them only too well when the familiar and enormous figure of Asterix started searching his ship. Down to the hold went Asterix, and soon he was flinging treasure chests and sacks of money up through the open hatch. Many of them went straight overboard, as Asterix looked for what he wanted, and failed to find it. But what's he after?" inquired the puzzled pirate captain, as yet another chest full of jewels splashed into the sea. He got the answer from Asterix himself. "There's nothing to eat on this ship, Asterix," Asterix called up from the hold, sounding thoroughly disappointed. "Only a load of old junk. Not even junk food, either." Splosh went a bag full of golden coins. "Please," the pirate captain begged Asterix, "sink this ship if you like. I mean, it's only an old junk anyhow. Another ship's neither here nor there. But do tell your friend to stop throwing our money overboard." "Can't be done. Sorry," said Asterix. "He's hungry, you see. And when Asterix is hungry, there's no stopping him." "But that's our treasure in the hold," wailed the pirate captain. "No hold's barred with Asterix around, I'm afraid," said Asterix. "Unless you happen to have a little snack on board after all, that is." "Quick!" shouted the captain frantically, turning to his men. "Turn out the galley this minute! Bring everything edible up on deck!" They made haste to obey his orders, all but one, the man who had been on lookout duty up in the crow's nest. He realized that the honor of the ship and its crew was at stake. While the other pirates brought all their provisions up on deck, he crept below with an axe, unnoticed by the Gauls. It turned out that Asterix had simply been looking in the wrong place. The pirates had plenty to eat on board. Ham, cheese, chickens, cakes, sausages, pumpkins, and best of all, wild boar. Once it was all heaped up on the carpet, there was hardly room for the three Gauls and Dogmatics too. Before boarding the carpet himself, Asterix dug around in his pocket. "We're honest men," he told the pirate captain. "Here you are, payment for our meal." And he flicked the pirate captain a solitary silver coin, joined his friends, and next moment they were airborne again, soaring away across the Tyrrhenian Sea. The coin fell to the deck. The pirate captain looked at it gloomily. "Oh, well, better than nothing, me hearties," he said at last, philosophically. "After all, they might have scuttled the ship." There was a funny sort of glugging, gurgling sound. The face of the lookout man appeared through the open hatch on deck. He was smiling broadly as he showed the captain his axe. "They won't get us down so easily, Cap'n," he said triumphantly. "Our honour is saved. I've scuttled the ship." And the glugging and the gurgling got louder and louder. Half an hour later, only the top of the mainmast with the pirate flag bearing the skull and crossbones still showed above the choppy waters of the Tyrrhenian Sea. The captain and his ancient peg-legged colleague were clinging to a plank of wood, stomachs heaving in time with the waves. "I've soaked us again," said the captain gloomily. "Enough to make you sick." "Sic transit gloria mundi," agreed Pegleg, always ready with a Latin tag. "Gloria who?" asked the pirate captain. "Mundi. Thus passes the glory of the world," said Pegleg, kindly translating. "Sickening, like you said." "Please," said the pirate captain, going green, "let's change the subject." And the two of them started steering their plank the long, long way to shore. On and on flew the carpet, while the Gauls enjoyed an excellent picnic meal in the air. Land came in sight again, and they flew over part of Italy. After 96 hours flying time, their pilot what's-his-name made an announcement. "We are now approaching Rome." The Gauls craned over the side of the carpet to have a look. They had been to Rome on previous occasions, but they'd never had an aerial view before. "I'll come down lower," said what's-his-name. "Then you can get a better look at this great and magnificent city." There lay Imperial Rome beneath them. Imperial Rome, with its fine wide streets and broad squares, with the Forum, the Colosseum, and the Circus Maximus, the river Tiber, the temples and aqueducts, the baths and the amphitheatres. It was indeed an impressive sight. Not that Obelix was going to admit as much. "Great city," he said. "Huh! It's not all that much bigger than our own village." "It is a bit bigger, you've got to admit," said Asterix. "I say, if only we had the time, we could drop in on old Julius Caesar. I wonder if he's at home today." Julius Caesar was not only at home, but in bed. He had not been well, and although he was recovering from his illness now, he looked very pale. A doctor was standing at his bedside, sponging his forehead. "That fever has left me very weak," Caesar complained. "Aesculapius, the god of medicine, was watching over you, O Caesar," said the doctor reassuringly. "It was just a touch of gravedo asiatica." Being a doctor, he used the Latin names for illnesses, and being Roman himself, and thus knowing Latin, Julius Caesar understood him. What the doctor really meant, of course, was Asian flu. The doctor persuaded his imperial master to get out of bed, wrap himself in a fur rug to keep out the draughts, and come out on the terrace of his palace. "Just try the fresh air wafting over Rome, O Caesar, and you'll feel better," he said. "I hope so," said Caesar. "You know, in my fevered delirium, I kept seeing those indomitable Gauls from Armorica, all over the place. It was like a nightmare." The sound of an all-too-familiar voice was suddenly heard overhead. "Well, I never," it remarked. Fresh air was not the only thing wafting over Rome. Looking up, the astonished Caesar and his equally astonished doctor saw that flying carpets were doing the same. "Hi, Julius, old chap," Asterix went on. "Nice to see you. Sorry we can't stop, we've got to fly." And they did. A little while later, two slaves were talking in hushed tones outside two bedroom doors in Caesar's palace. "Caesar and his doctor have both gone to bed now," one of them was confiding to the other. "In their fevered delirium, they keep saying they saw indomitable Gauls and an Asian faker." "Aye," said the other slave. "And the Gauls and the Asian flew." "A likely story," agreed his colleague. By now, of course, the carpet was out of sight, far away from Rome and flying over the sea again. The pirate ship's provisions had all been finished, and Obelix complained that he was hungry. "We'll soon be flying over Greece," what's-his-name said. "We'll touch down and find you something to eat there." Cacophonix was sitting cross-legged on the carpet, with his back to the others, sulking. "Ha! Of course, when Mr. Obelix is hungry, he gets his nourishment all right," he said grumpily. "Meaning what?" asked Obelix, baffled. "Meaning there's no justice on this carpet," grumbled the bard. "What do you want, then, Cacophonix?" Asterix asked. "My genius needs nourishment," announced the bard dramatically, rising to his feet. "I want to sing my poetic compositions." chuckled Obelix. "So he fancies himself a high-flying poet now?" This was too much for Cacophonix, whose temper was already fraying. "Insult a bard, would you?" he shrieked, red in the face. "How could you sink so low?" Obelix was getting cross too. "Just try singing and you'll find out," he bellowed back, red in the face himself. "Sink low, eh? You try singing and we'll be needing a hair carpet." "Do please keep calm," begged the faker, but nobody was listening to him. "I am about to lose my temper," announced the bard unnecessarily. Obelix burst into sarcastic song himself. "Our body's as high as an elephant's thigh, and I think he is going right up to the sky." Dogmatix lifted up his head and howled miserably. "Stop it, will you?" shouted the exasperated faker. "You make me feel ready to drop." But a singing competition was now in progress. Striking a fine attitude, Cacophonix sang loud enough to drown Obelix out. "Come, Bacchus, fill the flowing bowl, until it does run over," he warbled, invoking the Roman god of wine. And as he sang, the sky began to cloud over once again, and the first large drops of rain began to fall. Cacophonix sang even louder. "For tonight we'll merry be." "What about I can't imagine," muttered Obelix as the rain fell faster and faster. And clapping his hands to his ears, the faker not only felt ready to drop, as he had just said, he actually did drop. He lost his balance and toppled off his precarious perch on the very edge of the carpet. What with the heavy rain, the singing of Cacophonix, and the howling of Dogmatix, Asterix was the only one to see him go. "Help! Stop it, you lot! What's-his-name has fallen off the carpet!" he exclaimed in horror. And the singing and the howling very soon stopped of its own accord, because without the faker and his wonderful powers of concentration and levitation, the carpet was dropping like a stone, passengers and all. It landed in the sea with a mighty splosh. And for a little while there was nothing whatsoever to be seen of it or its passengers. Then 3 heads appeared above the waves, but only 3. The heads of Asterix, Obelix, and Cacophonix, with Dogmatix perched on top of Obelix's helmet. What's-his-name the faker, however, was nowhere in sight. For the moment the Gauls had to think about saving themselves, and they were in luck. "A ship!" exclaimed Asterix, "and I think they've seen us." Sure enough, the merchant ship sailing not far away had spotted the 3 Gauls and was turning to pick them up. They clambered on board, dripping wet. Fortunately, Obelix had salvaged the carpet and was wringing the water out of it. They were greeted by the ship's captain, a stout and friendly Greek merchant with a black beard and a green tunic. "Welcome aboard," he told the Gauls. "I'm on the premises." "So I see," said Asterix, shaking hands. "And we're glad to be on them too. I'm Asterix the Gaul. You haven't seen any fakers falling recently, have you?" "No," said on the premises, slightly surprised. "It's just been raining cats and dogs, which the Oracle Met Office failed to forecast, same as usual. No fakers, though." "And he's lost at sea," cried Asterix, horrified. "We're done for." All of a sudden, a voice was heard singing. Not Cacophonix this time, not even Obelix. "While the raging seas did roar," it sang, as the Gauls and the Greek merchant listened in surprise, unable to think where it was coming from. "While the raging seas did roar, hic, and the stormy winds did blow, and we jolly faker boys were all up, hic, aloft." "That's what's-his-name's voice," exclaimed Asterix, making for the place where it seemed to be coming from. On the premises ship had its cargo stacked in the open on the lower deck, with a narrow upper deck running around the sides of the vessel above. The cargo consisted of big corded bales, and rows of enormous jars, and the voice appeared to be coming from one of the jars. "I'm sure it's what's-his-name," cried Asterix, trying to track the right jar down. "And we jolly faker boys were all up aloft, and the landlubbers lying down below," continued the voice. "He's got hiccups too," said Asterix, locating what seemed to be the right jar. "On the premises, what have you got in these jars?" "Wine, of course, can't you tell?" said the Greek merchant. "If there's any left in this particular jar, that is." And putting in an arm, he fished out the limp, hiccuping, singing form of what's-his-name. "Would this by any chance be your faker?" he asked. "How dare," said Asterix, dismayed. "And he never touches wine, usually. It must have had a very bad effect on him.
He's certainly got a few jars inside him, agreed Obelix,
as what's-his-name reeled and staggered against the outside of the big wine jar. So much for the ascetic life, Cacophonix pointed out. As a faker, he's a faker, he added, pleased with what he thought was a good joke. Neat, eh? He asked the others. No one answered. And to think he calls himself a poet, thought Dogmatix, but in dog language. The faker collapsed on the planks of the ship's deck and fell fast asleep, snoring rhythmically. "Oh, help," said Asterix, really worried now. He picked up a bucket of water and flung it into what's-his-name's face. "If it's going to take him long to sleep this off, we'll arrive too late to save the lovely orangeade." "Never mind the orangeade, what about my wine?" asked On the Premises, ruefully inspecting the huge and almost empty jar. The bucket of water did no good. What's-his-name just went on snoring. "We must do something," said Asterix. He agitatedly paced the deck. "We must do something."
"Good idea," Obelix agreed. "Let's have lunch."
"Oh, really?" shouted Asterix. It was his turn to lose his temper now. "A fat lot of help I get from you two. One of you obsessed with food, and the other with singing." "That's a good idea," said Cacophonix brightly. "Why don't I give him a song, then?" "Oh, no," screeched Asterix, jumping up and down on the spot to relieve his feelings. "Oh, no! Here we go again!" But Cacophonix had thought it out quite sensibly this time. "Now listen, Asterix," he said. "My singing does seem to have a remarkable effect on what's-his-name. Hearing me just now appears to have moved him a great deal, right off the carpet, in fact. Maybe another song will rouse him from his drunken stupor." "Oh, well, it's just possible," Asterix admitted, as the faker snored on. "Well, no harm in trying, I suppose. I mean, we can hardly fall any lower than sea level. Go ahead, then." Cacophonix went ahead. He positioned himself in front of the unconscious, snoring faker. He twanged his lyre, he opened his mouth, he sang. "Speed, bonny boat, like a bird on the wing, over the sea to India." There was no noticeable effect on the faker. There was on the weather, though. The sky clouded over, the rain began to fall, and soon it was fairly pelting down. "Carry the bard, who will rescue the king," continued Cacophonix at the top of his voice, getting quite carried away himself. The sea was rising now. Huge waves carried the ship climbing up, and then sent her plunging down again. Breakers crashed over her deck. She tossed crazily in the grip of the storm. Lightning flashed, thunder rolled. "Stop it!" yelled Asterix. "Stop singing, Cacophonix, you idiot! You'll sink us!" "Too late," groaned On the Premises, clinging for dear life to the rail of his ship, as yet another great breaker swept over him. "We are sinking!" Fortunately, however, On the Premises was a skilful seaman, and although the ship was helpless in the grip of the waves, she did not actually capsize after all. She ended up intact and upright, but beached on a sandy shore, with the Greek merchant, the three Gauls, Dogmatix, and the still unconscious faker, all lying exhausted on the sand beside her. "Ah, wouldn't this just make the pirates laugh?" said Asterix ruefully. "Good thing we were near the coast," said On the Premises. "And to think of the song and dance my old friend Odysseus made about the sirens." The mention of singing seemed to rouse what's-his-name. He opened one eye, sat up, and resumed his own song again. "And we jolly faker boys were all up aloft." "Here you are," said Cacophonix proudly. "I knew I could wake him up." "Yes," said Asterix, examining what's-his-name dubiously. "He's not in great shape, though, which is hardly surprising, I suppose, after such a long fast."
"Same as me,"
said Obelix, discovering half an inch of space which needed filling between his tummy and the top of his trousers.
"I feel a bit weak and feeble myself."
On the Premises had problems of his own to bother him. "And what were you Gauls thinking of doing about my ship?" he inquired. Asterix took out his emergency gourd of magic potion, uncorked it, and drank some. "Weak and feeble as he may be," he told the Greek, "Obelix is going to help me refloat it On the Premises."
"Oh, So I'm not even allowed a moment's weakness, right? Asked Obelix sarcastically, as he and Asterix got into position at the landward end of the big, beached merchant ship. Just shut up and push, Obelix, said his friend. Standing on deck, while they pushed, on the premises the Greek merchant watched with amazement as the two Gauls, one large enough admittedly, but one really small and apparently weedy, effortlessly pushed him, his helmsman, his ship and his heavy cargo back into the water. Of course he didn't know about the magic potion and its amazing effects. "When I tell my friend Odysseus about my own Odyssey, he'll never believe me," he muttered, shaking his head. The friendly merchant put out to sea once more, leaving the three Gauls, Dogmatix and What's-His-Name on the beach. What's-His-Name, though conscious again and still humming and hiccuping, was obviously in a sorry state. Cacophonix waved goodbye to the Greek ship. "Nice chap on the premises," he said, "but I must say I'll be glad to be back on the comfort of the flying carpet." "Yes," said Asterix. "Where is it, by the way?" And suddenly it dawned on him that he hadn't set eyes on it since the storm broke over the ship. "The carpet!" he cried, horrified. "We've gone and lost the carpet!" The faker hiccuped again. "I'm thirsty," he complained. "And I'm hungry," said Obelix, predictably. Asterix took no notice of either of them. "We find the faker, and then we go and lose the carpet," he muttered, pacing round and round in circles. But next moment he heard a barking. "Woof, woof, woof!" "That's Dogmatix," said Obelix. "He's calling us." "Maybe he's found the carpet," exclaimed Asterix hopefully. "Maybe he's found a ball," exclaimed Obelix even more hopefully. The barking was coming from behind some rocks. Climbing them and peering down, the two Gauls saw what Dogmatix had found. "It is the carpet," cried Asterix thankfully. "So it is," agreed the disappointed Obelix. However, he picked it out of the sea where it had been lying in the shallows and wrung it again to get the water out. The carpet, however, was no use without a faker in a fit state to fly it. Racing back to What's-His-Name, Asterix tried to make him understand their predicament. "We must take off again at once, What's-His-Name," he insisted. "If we don't, we'll never be in time to save Princess Orangeade." The mention of that name got past the faker's splitting headache. "The princess?" he muttered. "Yes, quick!" And with the Gaul's help, he managed to stagger over to the carpet, get into his cross-legged pilot's position, and put his mind with a tremendous effort to concentrating on takeoff. He obviously didn't find it easy to exercise his powers just now. Cacophonix felt rather alarmed. "Do you think it's wise in his present state?" he whispered to Asterix. "Wise or not, we can't waste time," Asterix whispered back. "Eee!" grunted the faker. "Hip!" he hiccuped, as the carpet levitated. It bucked under him. Everyone on it also levitated, a foot or so above the carpet itself, and then they fell back onto it again, heavily. It dipped and jumped and jolted and bucketed as its pilot took off in a severe attack of hiccups. "Who was it mentioned the comfort of flying carpets?" gasped Obelix, as the passengers were flung into the air once more. But at least they were on the move again. Sounding pleased with himself and his newly discovered powers of song, What's-His-Name happily struck up another tune. "Here we go, here we go, here we go," he chanted. "Here we go, here we go, here we..." Meanwhile, far away, the beautiful Princess Orangeade was waiting with bated breath for any sign of her rescuers. She sent her lady-in-waiting up to the top of a tower to keep watch for the flying carpet, and called up to her every now and then. "Lemonade, my faithful Lemonade, do you see anyone coming?" The lady-in-waiting hopefully searched the cloudless sky, and reported sadly that her search was fruitless. "Or if not exactly fruitless, the answer is a lemon," she called down. And the less likely it seemed that the princess could be saved in time, the more whodunit felt he had to celebrate. He and his henchman, the wicked faker Ausat, sat in his luxurious apartments, drinking a toast to the end of the 1,001 hours. "Well, Ausat, my wicked henchman," said the guru, accurately enough describing Ausat, who was as nasty a piece of work as you could hope not to meet on an Arabian night. "Well, here's to the success of our plans. The heir of this kingdom will soon breathe the last of the heir of this kingdom." And he cackled madly at his own joke. "Heir of this kingdom! Heir of this kingdom, get it? Rather dry, eh?" "You always did have a dry wit, O divine master," said the horrible Owzat, cringing. Fakers came in all shapes and sizes, and Owzat was as disloyal to the Rajah as the faithful what's-his-name was loyal. Owzat was no ascetic either. He raised a brimming goblet to drink the toast proposed by whodunit. "Cheers, and may the forces of evil make that talkative fool what's-his-name dry up forever." Little did Owzat know it, but what's-his-name himself was echoing his very words as the carpet sped on its way, not so jerkily now that he had recovered from hiccups. "I'm a fool," said the faker ruefully, "and I've got a terrible thirst." "Well, I'm no fool, but I've got a terrible hunger," announced Obelix. "What's-his-name, you really mustn't blame yourself for what happened," Asterix assured the faker. "It wasn't your fault." But the faker couldn't forgive himself. "I've committed the sin of gluttony," he said mournfully, "and I really deserve this splitting headache. But what's even worse is the thought of the time we've wasted. Well, we mustn't waste any more now. Soon we shall be flying over Athens, and then we leave Greece behind." Sure enough, after 150 hours flying time, the rescue party was flying over the famous Greek city of Athens. It held nostalgic memories for Asterix and Obelix, who had once been there on their way to the Olympic Games. "Remember our trip to Olympia, Obelix?" Asterix asked his friend. "You bet I do," said Obelix, licking his lips. "Especially that nice little restaurant. Thermos was the proprietor's name, wasn't it? Yes, Thermos. And his stuffed vine leaves, and kebabs, and olives, and watermelon, and resinated wine. Yum, yum." He sighed heavily. The hours passed inexorably by, not without incident. As land came in sight once more, what's-his-name told the Gauls, "We shall soon be leaving the sea for the last time, and flying over the lands of the Orient." Obelix liked the sound of that. He didn't quite realize how large a place the Orient was, and thought they must be near their journey's end. "Good. Then we can come down and have some dinner at last," he said. Just at that moment, he felt a nasty, sharp sensation in his thigh. Twang went something, piercing it through the underside of the carpet. "Ow!" went Obelix, clutching his leg, and before the astonished and horrified eyes of his friends, he involuntarily leapt in the air, lost his balance, and tumbled backwards off the carpet, falling down, 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 without a parachute either, since parachutes had not yet been invented. Dogmatic set up a dreadful howling. Obelix fell like a stone, a particularly large and heavy stone, wearing an enormous pair of blue and white striped trousers. "Quick, what's-his-name is falling!" shouted Asterix. "I can still see him," said what's-his-name, doing his best to keep Obelix in view. "I think I'd better try flying underneath him." Swooping low, he skillfully manoeuvred the carpet into position, and in the very nick of time it scooped up Obelix in mid-air. Poor Obelix, half dazed, scarcely knew where he was. "Are you all right, Obelix?" asked Asterix anxiously, while Dogmatix barked with frantic delight and licked his master's face. "What happened to me?" inquired the bewildered Obelix. "What happened to me?" But no one had time to answer him. Arrows kept coming up through the carpet. "They're still shooting at us, by two tarties!" cried Asterix, as the Gauls huddled together so as to occupy as little space as possible. Not an easy thing to do when one of them was Obelix. "We're over Tyre," explained what's-his-name. "The Phoenicians of Tyre are rather hostile. Yes, it is rather tiresome." He himself, however, was sitting there quite undisturbed, even though he had half a dozen arrowheads sticking into his behind from under the carpet. "Let's get shot of this lot, quick!" gasped Cacophonix. And even the fearless Obelix admitted, "I don't like this one little bit." "Oh, you'll soon get used to it, if you'll take my point," said the faker, calmly removing several arrows from underneath himself,
and handing them to the Gauls as souvenirs. But he accelerated the carpet, and soon they were safely away from Tyre. Meanwhile, what about Princess Orangeade? The sky over Raja Watsit's kingdom was still relentlessly clear, and it was now only 300 hours from 0 hour, the time set for the sacrifice of the princess. Whodunit had already told the executioner to sharpen his axe and get the block ready. Brave as she was, Orangeade couldn't help being rather worried. She called up to her lady-in-waiting at the top of the tower again. "Lemonade, lemonade, do you see anyone coming?" "The answer's still a lemon," said Lemonade discouragingly. The more anxious the Rajah and the princess felt, the better pleased were Whodunit and his henchman Owsat. "Your weather forecasts have been accurate so far, Owsat," said the wicked guru, settling back with satisfaction on a pile of luxurious cushions. "Not a cloud on the horizon, but suppose what's-his-name actually does bring that Gaul back in time to make it rain." "I don't believe in that kind of miracle, O divine master," said the faker Owsat with an evil chuckle. "I mean, flying carpets are one thing, but rain-making is sheer science fiction." The scheming pair would have been much annoyed to know that not just one Gaul, but 3 Gauls and a dog were on their way. Obelix, as usual, had only one thing on his mind. "I'm hungry," he said for the umpteenth time. Cacophonix sighed, deciding regretfully against demanding nourishment for his genius again. They all remembered only too well what that had led to last time. There was another in-flight announcement from what's-his-name. "For your information," he said a trifle testily, "we are now flying over Persia, and you can tell your friend he must live on his hump a little longer. We've no time to waste." "Eating is never a waste of time," Obelix pointed out, quite offended. "Are you surprised I've got the hump? If we're going to arrive in the valley of the Ganges just skin and bone, we're not going to be much use to you, are we?" But before this argument could get any further, it was interrupted by natural causes. Asterix thought he felt a drop of rain. He stretched out his hand. Yes, here came another big raindrop. Soon the rain was positively pelting down. Everyone turned and glared at Cacophonix. "Look, it's nothing whatever to do with me," the bard protested. He was right. They had run into a normal, unsolicited thunderstorm. Thunder was rumbling all around them now, and a sudden great flash of lightning zoomed past them, striking the carpet as it went. "Watch out!" yelled Asterix. "The carpet's on fire!" And down they went. Flames rising from the carpet, black smoke billowing out behind as it spiraled out of control. "The carpet's been hauled! I can't hold it steady!" cried what's-his-name, desperately concentrating as hard as he could. But it was no use. Next moment, the Gauls, the faker, and the carpet itself, perilously bucketing down through the pouring rain of the thunderstorm, landed in the waters of a river with a mighty splosh. A moment or so later, they came up for air. They got wetter than ever, if possible, because the rain was still pouring down. "What luck I managed to divert our flight path towards this river," gasped the faker. "Yeah, but we're all washed up now," said Asterix gloomily, and Obelix agreed. "This certainly pours cold water on our plans. What's more," he added, climbing out on the riverbank and wringing the water out of the carpet yet again, "this carpet's more like a bath mat now." He held the carpet up. It had a large hole burned right through the middle. "Oh dear, oh, that's torn it," said the dismayed what's-his-name, accurately enough. "We can't go on with our journey. I ought to have brought a spare carpet along." "Maybe we can get this one mended," Asterix sensibly suggested. What's-his-name cheered up a little. "That is possible," he said. "In fact, we may have fallen on our feet landing here." "We didn't. We fell in the river," Obelix pointed out. "What I mean is that Persia is famous for its carpets," said what's-his-name. "If we walk on along this riverbank, we might come across a carpet mender." Obelix put his head through the hole in the carpet and wore it like a poncho. That seemed the easiest way to carry it. And they walked on along the riverbank, as what's-his-name had suggested. Indeed, they walked on and on and on for several hours, and still there wasn't a human soul in sight. I tell you what, said Cacophonix gloomily. We've had the rug pulled out from under us.
I'm hungry, said Obelix yet again.
And time is passing. Oh, he'll never make it now, said poor what's-his-name, thinking of the princess waiting for them. Hey, look, cried Asterix all of a sudden. Isn't that a village over there? It was indeed. They were coming to a fair-sized village built beside the river, and on the river bank they saw just what they were looking for. Several beautiful Persian carpets, some hanging over a wooden framework, some draped on the rocks, with a Persian standing beside them, washing them with a big broom that he kept dipping in the water. Asterix stepped forward and raised his helmet politely. "Hello. I see you have some very fine carpets," he said. "That's right," agreed the man. "I'm a carpet maker, see. I'm washing this one I've just finished weaving."
If you want a really well-washed carpet, said Obelix, pointing to his drenched poncho, I've got one here.
Could you mend it? Asterix asked the Persian, pointing out the hole. The Persian felt the carpet between thumb and forefinger. "Sorry, can't be done," he said. "Why not?" asked Asterix, surprised. "Because I only mend the carpets I make and sell myself," said the man. He turned away. "What's more," he added, sounding quite pleased about it, "nobody around here would agree to mend a carpet that wasn't made in Persia." "What?" said Asterix, appalled. For a moment he didn't know what to do. Then he glanced at Obelix and nodded.
"Oh, can I?" said Obelix. "I've really been missing the Romans. I've missed having nobody to shake. Ooh, can I really?"
"Go ahead," said Asterix. And he, Cacophonix, Dogmatix, and what's-his-name stood back to watch. Obelix grabbed the unhelpful Persian and shook him. He shook him and shook him and shook him until his teeth rattled. Then he picked him up by the front of his tunic and held him above the ground, feet dangling helplessly.
"So you can't mend foreign holes, is that it?" he growled. "Well, let me tell you something. We're not foreigners. We're Gauls. Got it?"
Yes, of course," gasped the unfortunate Persian, perspiring and terrified. But I really can't mend your carpet. I don't have the necessary spare part." This was bad news. But then Asterix had another idea. After all, the magic didn't lie in the carpet itself. It lay in the strange powers of the faker. They were what levitated it. He felt sure what's-his-name could concentrate just as hard with a different carpet. Anyway, the idea was worth a try. "How much would one of your own carpets cost?" he asked the Persian. "To you, only 1 silver talent," said the man. "I suppose talents are the Persian currency?" Asterix asked what's-his-name, who nodded. "Well, what about it? 1 silver talent doesn't seem very much to ask for a carpet." "Persian talents weigh 30 kilos of silver each," what's-his-name told him. "You need a real talent for making money to get one." Obelix put the Persian carpet-maker down in order to tap his forehead and give the others his considered opinion.
"These Persians," he said, "are crazy."
Now what? The rescue party needed rescuing themselves. They were stranded in Persia, still hundreds of miles away from the valley of the Ganges, and by now it was only 180 hours from 0 hour and the princess's execution. They sat down beside the river to think things over. Unfortunately, it didn't seem to improve matters. "Our carpet's in holes, and we don't have any talent for getting another," wailed poor what's-his-name. "All is lost."
"Oh, I don't know. We could always help ourselves to one," said Obelix, glancing at the carpet-maker. He got support from Cacophonix. "Obelix is right," said the bard. "It's no use being holier than thou in a hole like this." "No," said Asterix, too honest even to entertain such an idea. "We can't steal away on a stolen carpet." The Persian carpet-maker was glad to hear that. Nervously, with one eye still on Obelix, he sidled away with his broom. "I'll just go on brushing my carpets then, all right," he muttered. But as he made his way back to the carpets,
Another Persian came dashing out of the village in a panic-stricken state. "The Scythians are coming!" he shouted. "The Scythian pirates are coming!"
"Pirates?" said Obelix, pricking up his ears hopefully. "Oh, goody!"
"Not our old friends, Obelix," said Asterix. "The Scythians are people who originally came from the Crimea, and who ride about looting. They're land pirates. They'll be on horseback." Sure enough, a cloud of dust thrown up by horses' hooves could already be seen on the horizon, growing larger, coming closer, and soon the thud of the hooves could be heard as well.
"Land pirates might be fun all the same,"
suggested Obelix. "Just keep quiet and wait a moment," Asterix whispered. "We may be able to turn this to our own advantage." The Persian carpet-maker was now as panic-stricken as his friend, and the other villagers who had rushed out after him. "Help!" he screeched. "What shall we do? The pirates will steal our carpets and burn our houses down yet again!" And then suddenly he thought of the strangers who had recently arrived on the scene, and the immense strength of the man who had picked him up and shaken him. Perhaps they could help. Turning to Asterix, who was obviously the leader, small and insignificant as he looked, the Persian carpet-maker fell on his knees. "Strangers, I beg you," he implored, "if you have any powers, use them to help us mend matters, or it will be the end of our village." "Sorry," said Asterix, sounding smug about it. "Sorry, can't be done." "Why not?" asked the man piteously. "Because, as we're foreigners, your problems are foreign to us. And as a matter of fact, we don't have the necessary spare part either," said Asterix. "What's that?" asked the man. "A carpet," said Asterix. "Take this one by Ahura Mazda," said the carpet-maker eagerly, swearing by the god of the ancient Persians. "Take it, do." "Done, by Tutatis," said Asterix happily, shaking hands on the deal. He looked with satisfaction at the handsome blue and gold carpet the Persian was offering them. And now, of course, he must fulfil his side of the bargain. "Cacophonix, you wait here with Dogmatics," he told the bard, while he, Obelix, and the faker boarded the new carpet. "This won't take long." What's-his-name was an expert carpet pilot, and he soon got the hang of his new vehicle's controls. As he stretched out his arms, concentrating like mad, the blue and gold carpet rose steadily into the air before the eyes of the astonished Persian villagers.
"A bit of action at last,"
said Obelix, gleefully rubbing his hands. Asterix did not have long to organize his plans. The Scythian horsemen were galloping up fast. They were a fearsome sight, with their fierce bearded faces and strange pointed caps, as they thundered down on the Persian village, waving spears and battle-axes, and uttering blood-curdling war-cries. "What's-his-name?" said Asterix. "You see that line of Scythian horsemen making straight for the village? Can you fly through their ranks, quite low?" What's-his-name got the idea at once.
"Planning to scythe through the Scythians, are you?" he asked, chuckling.
If the Persian villagers had been surprised by the sight of the flying carpet, the Scythians were not just astonished, but terrified, and so were their horses. The flying carpet went zooming right through the ranks of the men, unhorsing them, scattering both mounts and riders in wild confusion. And as they passed, Asterix and Obelix leant over the sides of the carpet, thumping Scythians as enthusiastically as if they'd been Romans. Asterix used a club he had borrowed from the Persians. Obelix just used his bare hands. Any Scythians who hadn't been hit dropped their battle-axes and spears in terror and fled, for although they were fierce, they were also very superstitious. "By the great goddess!" gasped the Scythian leader, swearing by the deity he and his men worshipped. "These must be demons from the sky! Let us fly!" Unfortunately, and unlike Asterix and Obelix, they couldn't. But those still on horseback galloped away as fast as they could go, leaving the place littered with the debris of battle.
"Is it over already?" asked Obelix, disappointed. "Personally, I prefer Romans. They last longer."
However, the Persian villagers were very glad it was all over. Nothing was too good for the Gauls now. "Long live our heroes!" they shouted, as Asterix, Obelix, and What's-his-name flew a lap of honour overhead on the carpet. "And it's my carpet they did it with, too.
boasted the Persian carpet-maker, who had refused to mend their hole in the first place. He had certainly changed his tune now. "We owe you a lot," he told Asterix and Obelix when they had landed again. "What can we give you? Besides the carpet, of course." "Something to eat," begged Obelix, in heartfelt tones. Little villages were obviously much the same the world over, for before long the Gauls, Dogmatics, and the Faker were sitting down to a great banquet held in their honour. There was no roast boar, but they were served with other interesting dishes instead. "What are these little black things?" asked Asterix, helping himself from a great mound of them. "Oh, only fish eggs, just poor man's fare," the carpet-maker told him. "We call them caviar. They're very nourishing, though, I'll say that for them." "In that case, 1 egg will do for me," said the abstemious Faker, picking out a tiny black speck to eat as his share of the entire banquet. "What's that?" asked Obelix, as a huge joint of meat was served up. "Roast camel," the Persian carrying one end of the dish told him. "It's as good as dromedary, but a better buy, because it has 2 humps." And Obelix was soon tucking in. He knew where his loyalties lay, though. Later, as the rescue party took off on its new blue and gold carpet, waving goodbye to the cheering Persian villagers, he gave his friends his considered opinion once again. "A roast camel may be a good buy, but it's not really up to a good roast boar." "No one would ever guess," said Asterix, "considering the amount you ate." What's-his-name had been fretting slightly at the time spent enjoying the banquet. "Right, now we've filled up again, we must make up for lost time and fly straight to Raja What's-its kingdom," he reminded his passengers. And what, you may ask, had been going on meanwhile in Raja What's-its kingdom? Time was getting shorter and shorter. Even the wonderfully good, brave, and beautiful Princess Orangeade's temper was getting a little shorter, as she called up to her lady-in-waiting yet again. "Lemonade, lemonade, do you see anyone coming?" "The answer's still a the lady-in-waiting began. "Oh, forget it!" snapped the princess. The Rajah tried to comfort his daughter. "I will not see you die, dear Orangeade," he said. "I'd rather abdicate in favour of whodunit." But the princess had summoned up her courage again. "Don't worry, father," she said. "I'm sure everything will be all right. What's-his-name isn't just anyone, you know. He's what's-his-name?" The passing of time was good news for Whodunit and Owzat, however. They felt sure now that their wicked plans couldn't fail. As they reclined on cushions in the Guru's apartments, smoking their hookah pipes, they gloated. "No knights in shining armour riding to old What's-its aid as the 1,001 hours tick by, Owzat," said Whodunit gleefully. "No, it would take 1,001 nights to save him and the princess now," agreed the Faker Owzat. Then a sudden nasty thought occurred to him. He hardly liked to run the risk of annoying his master, but all the same. "Whodunit, oh divine master," he said, cringing even more than usual. "Suppose there's still no rain when you've executed the princess?" Whodunit wasn't offended, because he'd already thought of that one himself. "Easy," he said. "The god Indra will call for more royal blood, and it will be off with the Raja's head." "But suppose it still doesn't rain?" Owzat ventured to ask. "It won't matter a bit," said Whodunit cheerfully, "because then I'll be a Raja myself." He gave a chuckle more evil than any that even he had chuckled before. Meanwhile, the valiant Persian carpet was flying on, never tiring. Sometimes it crossed baking deserts, where the poor Gauls almost melted with the heat. Sometimes it faced the bitter weather of the mountain peaks, where they huddled together for warmth, snow on their heads and icicles dripping off their whiskers and the fringe of the carpet. What's-his-name didn't seem to mind either the heat or the cold, and kept pointing out the beauties of the landscape. "These are the Himalayas," he said,
as they crossed a particularly spectacular mountain range, also known as the Roof of the World.
"As scenery goes, it leaves me cold," said Obelix crossly, snapping a few icicles off his nose.
But at last, exactly 30 hours, 30 minutes, and 30 seconds from 0 hour, the carpet reached its destination. "What a moment!" said the faker happily. "We've come all the way from Gaul, over Italy and Greece, over Mesopotamia and Persia, over deserts and mountains, and here we are at last, the River Ganges." "What river?" asked Cacophonix. For all the Gauls could see, it was a wide strip of mud below them, with a lot of people sloshing the mud over themselves or each other. "Are you sure this is the right place?" asked Asterix doubtfully. "Looks a bit gungy to be the Ganges." "It was the Ganges," admitted what's-his-name. "But of course the water's practically dried up, because we've had no rain for so long."
"What are all these people doing, though, squelching about in the mud?" asked Obelix.
"The Ganges is a sacred river," what's-his-name explained. "Even in this terrible drought, the people still come here to wash, thus purifying their souls and their bodies. See?" The Gauls tried, but all they could actually see was a lot of very muddy bodies.
"Clear as mud," said Obelix, tapping his forehead. "These Indians are crazy."
The carpet had crossed the muddy bed of the River Ganges now, and was making for a beautiful building with many towers, arcades, and turrets. The royal flag flew over it. "And here is Raja What's-its palace," announced what's-his-name. All the waiting done by Princess Orangeade's faithful lemonade had paid off at last. "I see what's-his-name carpet coming. He's about to break," she called down from her tower. "And he's got some Gauls on board. This could be our lucky break." The princess, needless to say, was delighted, and leant out of her window to see the welcome sight. Then she hurried to tell her father the good news, and they both watched the carpet approach. "There, father," she exclaimed. "Wasn't I right to trust the faithful what's-his-name?" The Guru Whodunit, on the other hand, was far from pleased. "Curses!" he snarled, as he skulked in his apartment, feverishly making new plans to thwart the rescue attempt. What's-his-name skillfully piloted the carpet in through one of the open arches leading to the Raja's throne room. His skill deserted him only at the very last moment, when he actually landed, and forgot that there was a flight of steps leading up to the Raja's throne. He brought the carpet down bumpily on several of the steps at once, tipping his passengers off backwards. "Oh, sorry," the faker apologized. "I should have watched my step." But there was no harm done. The Gauls picked themselves up and climbed the steps to greet Raja What's-it. "As promised, great Raja," said What's-his-name, bowing low, "I bring you the Gauls who can make it rain. May the 30 million gods of India carry them to Nirvana, our Indian paradise, for the miracle they are about to work," exclaimed the grateful What's-it. Obelix hardly heard a word the Raja said. He had been bowled over by the beauty of the princess. Dogmatix, who knew how susceptible Obelix was to a pretty girl, could hardly stifle his giggles. Asterix politely returned the Raja's greeting, and was quick to point out modestly, "Our bard here is the one who can make it rain when he sings." Cacophonix tried to look modest too, not very successfully. After all, this was to be his hour of triumph. This was the place where his audience would really appreciate him. "The 1,001 hours are running out," said the Raja, "and our number will soon be up. But would you like some refreshments before you start working your miracle?" This was the kind of thing Obelix liked to hear. It even took his mind off the lovely Princess Orangeade.
"A miraculously refreshing idea," he said. "Yummy, yummy. Refreshments. Lead us to them."
While the Gauls were having their refreshments, a palace official went out into the city to read a proclamation to the people. "The Gaulish miracle worker has arrived," he announced, "and he will make it rain this afternoon. All the Raja's subjects are summoned to the palace to witness the miracle." Most of the Rajah's subjects were happy to believe what he said. "Oh, for a patch of grey sky again," said some of them longingly. "Oh, to wash in rain and not in mud." Others, however, weren't so hopeful. They obviously didn't trust the weather forecast much. "Making heavy weather of it as usual," one man grumbled. "They're always promising rain, and it always goes and turns out fine." Whodunit and Owsette looked very glum as they listened to the proclamation. "If what's-his-name is right, these Gauls will put a damper on our plans," said Whodunit gloomily. At the appointed time, all the Rajah's subjects gathered outside the palace. They were a huge crowd. This was going to be the biggest audience Cacophonix had ever had. He was standing next to the Rajah on the great balcony of the royal palace, looking very important. Beside them stood What's-his-name, Orangeade, Asterix and Obelix, with Dogmatics perched on the balcony rail. Silence fell, and the Rajah addressed his people. "Good people," he announced, "here, brought to us from far, far away by the faker What's-his-name, is the Gaul who will invoke the gods in song and persuade them to send rain from heaven and water our crops." Everyone applauded. Cacophonix began twanging his lyre. Cling it went. Clang, clong, boing! A kindly person might have thought he was tuning it. Otherwise nobody would have guessed. "Are you sure this is going to work?" the Rajah asked Asterix, a little anxiously, in an undertone. "Quite sure, I'm afraid," said Asterix. "It always does." But for once, having seen the pathetic state of the drought-ridden country, he didn't flinch too much at the prospect of one of Cacophonix's performances. "You never had an audience like this before, Cacophonix," he told the bard. "Off you go, then. Play up." Cacophonix struck a poetic attitude. He raised his lyre. He thrust out his chest. Asterix and Obelix put their hands over their ears. Dogmatics put his paws over his. Cacophonix opened his mouth to sing. No sound came out. He tried again. Harder and harder. He was pale with the effort of it. And still no sound came out. Asterix, who couldn't hear a thing with his ears covered, nonetheless slowly began to realize that something was not going according to plan. He glanced at the bard. By now Cacophonix was beetroot red in the face with the effort of trying to sing, and still no sound emerged. Asterix uncovered his ears and realized what was going on, or what wasn't. "Come on," he said crossly. "I told you to play up." "Why are you playing up now? Why aren't you playing up now? Oh, bother it all. Why aren't you singing?" Cacophonix desperately shook his head, opened his mouth wide and pointed to his throat. It looked very sore. "Oh, no," cried Asterix in horror, realizing what Cacophonix was trying to tell him. "Don't say you've lost your voice, I ask you." Asterix was red in the face himself now and thumping the balcony with his fist in his fury. "I ask you," he said. "When we don't want him to sing, he sings, and when we do want him to sing, he can't. Now we'll really have to face the music." As the people began to grasp the fact that the Gaulish bard wasn't going to sing after all, and there wouldn't be any miracles today, they began to mutter discontentedly. Fancy summoning them all to the palace for a fiasco like this. Someone threw a rotten mango, another followed it, and pretty soon Cacophonix was being pelted with large quantities of squashy fruit and vegetables. "Oh dear," quavered the Rajah, scuttling out of range of the flying greengroceries. "This isn't the kind of rain I was really hoping for." Obelix had grabbed hold of his friend to calm him down, at Asterix's own request. "Keep that bard well away from me, or I might do him an injury," he shouted. But of course Cacophonix's silence had been music to the ears of Whodunit and Owsette. They leant over their own balcony, chuckling. "By all the avatars," said Whodunit, swearing by the incarnations and metamorphoses of those 30 million Indian gods, "the Gauls will have to change their tune now. Ha 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 ha! I told you so, O divine master," said Owsette the faker. "Rain-making is sheer science fiction." "All the same, we must be careful to keep the heat on," said Whodunit, as he and Owsette retreated into his apartment again. "Now I have an idea." Meanwhile, the Gauls were back in the throne room. Asterix had recovered from his fit of temper, and was helping to wipe the sticky fruit pulp and juice off the bard. "I'm sorry I got so upset, Cacophonix," he apologised. "I know it's not really your fault. You must have caught a cold on the way here, up in the freezing Himalayas, I expect." Cacophonix nodded vigorously. "Perhaps, with careful nursing, we can cure him and get him singing again before the 1,001 hours run out," What's-his-name hopefully suggested. The Rajah was quick to act on this suggestion. "Summon my doctors at once," he ordered, snapping his fingers. The doctors came. Several doctors, each with an expert opinion of his own. A little later they were all clustered round poor Cacophonix, thumping his back, listening to his chest, prodding his tongue and inspecting the back of his throat. Voiceless as he was, Cacophonix couldn't even utter a protest. Eventually, the doctors delivered their diagnoses. "A purely psychosomatic case," pronounced the senior doctor, who was considered a terrible bore by his younger colleagues. "A purely psychosomatic case arising from the conflict of his ego with his introvert instincts, which thus form a syndrome to be described as paranoia vulgaris, which I will now demonstrate ad nauseam." But luckily for Cacophonix, the other doctors insisted on having their say too. "Contraria contrariis curanta," said one of them wisely. "Quod capita tot sensus," said another, equally helpfully. "Hey, chaps, have you seen this?" inquired one of the younger doctors, examining the bard's throat. "Nothing to write home about, is it?" The Gauls thought he sounded horribly cheerful about it. "I can see only one way to make him talk," said a fifth doctor brightly. "Take his tongue out." They moved away from the unfortunate Cacophonix, who was looking positively terrified by now, and consulted together at length in lowered voices. Finally the senior doctor approached Rajah Watsit and bowed low. "We have successfully diagnosed the trouble, O great Rajah," he announced, "and we have also worked out the course of treatment to be followed. The patient must soak all night in a bath of milk from a mother elephant, mixed with the fresh dung of an elephant calf, and the ground hair of an old bull elephant. That ought to cure him in a hurry if anything can." "Quick, bring all those ingredients," the Rajah commanded. But the faker What's-his-name had a better idea. "Why don't we take the Gaul straight to the source of production, O great Rajah," he suggested. "It would be simpler if he called on Howdoo, the elephant trainer." "Sounds as if that'll be a trunk call," said Asterix, as he and Obelix helped the unfortunate Cacophonix to his feet. "We'd better go to Howdoo's on foot," What's-his-name told his friends, "so as not to arouse the evil whodunit suspicions." And they set off through the city streets. The place was not at all like the Gaulish village, and there were many interesting sights to be seen. Bazaars with wonderful oriental silks and spices for sale, women in saris gracefully carrying jars on their heads, men in colourful turbans, and cows just sitting about in the streets. Rather skinny cows, but cows all the same. Obelix looked at them greedily as he passed by. The refreshments they had on arrival seemed a long time ago. He turned to What's-his-name. "I say, those cows," he began. No, said What's-his-name briskly. "I know what you're going to ask, and the answer is definitely not. Cows are sacred here. They're allowed to roam freely wherever they like, and no one may harm them. Anyway, we don't particularly care for eating meat around here." This was more than Obelix could understand. "I only hope wild boar aren't sacred here too," he muttered, shaking his head. What with the interesting scenes they were passing, and all they had on their minds, neither What's-his-name nor any of the Gauls noticed a couple of villainous-looking thugs following them through the streets. One big tough thug, one small sinister thug. Every now and then they managed to get close enough to overhear what the Gauls were saying. They were still following, though keeping well out of sight, as the little party passed through the city gates and went on into the countryside. Before long they reached the outskirts of a forest. "We call it the jungle in India," said What's-his-name, "and Howdoo the elephant trainer lives here with his trained elephants and the men who ride them. It's not far now." Sure enough, before long the Gauls saw elephants walking by, each elephant with a man on its back. each elephant carrying a whole tree in its trunk. And soon they came to some huts. A big jovial man came out to meet them. He wore purple trousers with yellow spots, and had his hair done up in a topknot tied with a strip of red ribbon. Obviously the elephant trainer was a colourful character. "Here we are," said the faker. "How do, how do?" "Same to you, what's his name?" replied the elephant trainer. "And you are welcome too, noble strangers." "Meet my Gaulish friends, how do," said the faker. "They'll need your help. It's urgent." But at this point Obelix's attention was distracted by a cracking noise. He looked round and saw one of the elephants pushing a tree down simply by leaning on it, hard. "How do here is the best elephant trainer in the country," what's-his-name told the Gauls. "He gets his animals to perform amazing feats." Obelix wasn't particularly impressed. "A handy feat? But what's so amazing about it?" he asked, strolling over to a large tree. The cracking noise was heard again. "Seems to me the kind of thing it's easy to pick up," he added, suiting the action to the words and plucking the tree out of the ground, roots and all, with the greatest of ease. The elephant trainer was astonished. He gazed at Obelix with awe and admiration. Dogmatix, however, was not pleased at all. He set up a terrible howl of disapproval. "Oh, sorry, Dogmatix," said Obelix remorsefully. "I quite forgot how you hate to see anyone pick the pretty trees." The elephants themselves were looking at Obelix in surprise. "By the way, Obelix," said Asterix, pointing to one of them, "weren't you asking me on the way what a pachyderm was?" "Yes," said Obelix. "Well, that is," said Asterix. "Huh?" said Obelix, tossing the tree lightly away over his shoulder. "Not much like me, is it?" "You're very well trained, stranger," said Howdo. "Very well trained. Listen, I can give you a job if you like." It was Obelix's turn to look surprised. "Howdo, that's not the kind of thing we're here for," what's-his-name explained. "The Gaulish bard has lost his voice and can't sing. The doctors have prescribed him a bath of elephant's milk mixed with elephant dung and elephant hair. We thought you could mix one up on the premises." "Bother that," said the elephant trainer cheerfully. "Doctors, what do they know about it? I know a much quicker cure. I had an elephant once who couldn't trumpet because his trunk was all stuffed up. So how do you think I cured him? Why, by blowing down his trunk very hard, that's how. Since then I admit he's tended to get wind, but he can blow his own trumpet all right. I'll do the same for your friend here, if you like." Poor Cacophonix was struggling helplessly to protest. He thought the idea sounded quite horrible. Luckily for him, Asterix thought so too, and firmly pushed the elephant trainer away as he advanced purposefully towards the bard. "No thanks, I do," said Asterix hastily. "All things considered, I think he'd prefer the original prescription." "Anything you say," said the elephant trainer rather regretfully. "It's a shame, though. I'm sure my cure would have worked on a nose like his." But Asterix wouldn't let him try it. Instead, Howdo's assistants came along carrying jar after jar of elephant's milk, basket after basket of elephant dung, basin after basin of ground elephant hair, and mixed it all up in a bathtub. The smell was something dreadful. Cacophonix stripped down to a loincloth and stood there shivering, trying to summon up the courage to get in. Obelix and Dogmatix were having a fit of the giggles at the sight of the bard, and trying not to let him see it, so as to spare his feelings. "We'll leave you now, Cacophonix," said Asterix, "but we'll be back tomorrow morning." "When you're ready to work miracles again," said what's-his-name. The two thugs who had been following the Gauls were lurking outside all this time, but at this point they must have found out what they wanted to know, because they quietly slipped away. And a little later they were reporting back to who-done-it who had sent them. "The Gaulish bard is at Howdo the elephant trainer's," the big tough thug told the guru. "And he'll be there all night on his own," said the small, sinister thug. "Excellent, excellent," said who-done-it, grinning a horrible grin. "Now this is what you have to do." And he told them his evil plan. It was 18 hours from 0 hour, the time of the princess's execution, and night had fallen, when the bard's lonely vigil in his bathtub was rudely interrupted by the two thugs. They broke in, hauled him out of the tub, and tied him up. In fact, his vigil was very rudely interrupted. since they weren't concerned with his finer feelings, and didn't scruple to say what they thought about the way he smelt. "What a pong," said the big tough thug. "It makes me gag." "At least we needn't waste time gagging him, seeing he can't speak," said the small, sinister thug. They got the bard up on a stolen elephant with passenger baskets each side, and rode away through the jungle, still grumbling about the smell. "I can stand most things," said the big tough thug morosely. The night, the jungle my night. But this stink is too much even for me. The sooner we get where we're going, the better," agreed the small, sinister thug. Whodunit and Whatsit were keeping track of the hours as the night passed by. The moon was high in the sky. "By now our men will be taking the Gaul to the sacred sanctuary of the elephant's graveyard in the heart of the jungle," Whodunit calculated. "Hee, chuckled the faker Owsat. "And by the time he's found, the furious elephants will have trampled him to death." Asterix and Obelix, of course, had no idea of what was happening to the bard. They spent a peaceful night in luxurious beds in the Rajah's palace. What's-his-name woke them next morning, flying in through the great arched window of their bedroom, on the faithful blue and gold Persian carpet that had served them so well. "Time to go and get Cacophonix," he announced. "Come along, rise and shine. We'll get there faster by carpet." "What about my breakfast?" said Obelix, horrified at the thought of going without, which seemed to be what the faker was suggesting. "There's a time and a place for everything," said Asterix. He jumped out of bed. "Come on, hurry up." And before Obelix knew it, they were on the Persian carpet and flying out of the window again. "I can't wait to see if the cure has worked," said What's-his-name. "I can't wait to know when it'll be the time and the place for my breakfast," grumbled Obelix. "I feel so flat when my tummy's empty." "And your tummy's not the only part of you," said Asterix, looking meaningfully at the small part of Obelix's large head, where he might be supposed to keep his brain. Obelix took no notice. "There, you admit it yourself. I do have a flat tummy," he said with dignity. From his own windows, however, the wicked guru Whodunit had seen the carpet take off. He didn't want the Gauls to get to Howdo the elephant trainer's place and discover that Cacophonix was missing just yet. There was still time for the ingenious What's-his-name to think of some new, clever dodge. He turned to his faithful henchman, the faker Owsat. "They're off to fetch the bard. Try to delay them, Owsat," he ordered. "Hey, that'll be easy," cackled Owsat. "My carpet's parked quite close." And singing happily to himself, he waltzed down the steps of Whodunit's apartments and sat down on his own grey and yellow flying carpet. "Now for the showdown, What's-his-name," he said. There was great rivalry between the two fakers, and Owsat was determined to prove that he was the best at magic. Accelerating like mad, he caught up with What's-his-name and his passengers, and braked to a stop in mid-air, carpet screeching, just before the two carpets collided head-on. Stretching out his right hand, he sent magic forces rippling towards his opponent to hold him back. "You shall not pass, What's-his-name," he cried. "By Vayu," gasped What's-his-name, calling on one of the great gods of India, as he reached his own hand out, sending his own magic force field into the air. "Owsat!" "Not out, I'm afraid," said Obelix regretfully, for it looked as if neither faker was stronger than his rival. The two carpets hovered exactly where they were, held in place by the equally powerful magic of both fakers. They hurled magical invocations at each other. "Agni consume you in the fire of hell," said Owsat, swearing by the god of fire. "Kala turn you to stone till the end of time," replied What's-his-name, swearing by the god of time. "We're never going to get anywhere at this rate," Asterix muttered crossly. It wouldn't do any harm to invoke a Gaulish god for a change, he thought. "Totatis help us," he said. "This carpet's much too high in the air for us to jump off." But at that moment, the end of a rope came rising vertically upwards through the air and stayed there, rigid. Asterix could hardly believe his eyes when he looked down and saw that it seemed to be coming up of its own accord, from a coil of rope on the ground. A little faker, who looked very much like What's-his-name, was sitting beside it, with a cobra in a basket, and playing a tune on his pipe. "Come on, said Asterix. "This is our chance." And seizing a rope, he shinned down it. Getafix was right. These people do have strange powers.
"Do they?"
said Obelix, following him down the rope, with the terrified Dogmatix perched on top of his helmet.
"What's so strange? I mean, it's only a rope hanging up."
But the moment they were both safely down, the rope went limp and fell to the ground in coils again. "Thanks very much for throwing us a rope," Asterix said to the man playing the pipe. "You're welcome," he said. "What's his name's an old friend of mine. Pleased to meet you. By the way, I'm an Indian rope trickster and snake charmer." "Charmed to meet you too," said Asterix fervently, shaking hands before he and Obelix hurried off. They could still hear the two fakers exchanging magical curses up in the air above. "Surya, consume your bones," said Owzat, swearing by the god of the sun. "Vak, turn your tongue to stone," replied What's-his-name, swearing by the god of speech. "If they're going to invoke all their 30 million gods, we shan't be seeing What's-his-name again in a hurry," said Asterix. "Come on, there's no time to lose. We must collect Cacophonix and take him back to the palace to sing. I never thought I'd be in any hurry to hear him do that." But when they reached a hut in the jungle and knocked on the door, no one answered. Asterix knocked again. And again. "I don't like this a bit," he said, worried. "There's no reply. And if there's no reply, that must mean Cacophonix hasn't got his voice back yet." Unable to bear the suspense any longer, he simply opened the door and walked in. However, there was no one in the hut at all, with or without a voice. Both the hut and the bathtub were empty. After the first shock, Asterix rushed out to find Howdo, and almost collided with him. Howdo was looking very upset, and carrying an elephant's chain and leg shackle. "Howdo, our friend's been kidnapped," gasped Asterix. "Look, here's his lyre and his clothes. He'd never have left of his own free will without 'em, especially not his lyre." "And I've had an elephant stolen," said Howdo, who was not his usual genial self. "My favourite elephant, the one whose trunk I unblocked." Dogmatix was sniffing away at the elephant's leg shackle. Asterix put two and two together fast. "Howdo, I rather think the same people stole both our bard and your elephant," he said. Next moment his guess was confirmed. "Dogmatix has picked up a scent," shouted Obelix, as his little dog suddenly went racing off, nose close to the ground. "Let's follow him, quick," said Asterix, setting off. "I'll come with you. I want my elephant back," said Howdo. "I'm sure Cacophonix is in danger," panted Asterix, as they raced along. "I only hope we can get there in time, wherever it is." Time was indeed getting short. It had been only 9 hours from 0 hour when the big tough thug and the small sinister thug thankfully abandoned Cacophonix in the elephant's graveyard. An eerie place, full of vast skulls and elephant bones. The bard's desperate attempts to utter a sound were still in vain, and the thugs took no notice of his struggles. "Let's clear off," said the small sinister thug. "The air here isn't very healthy." "Especially not near that stinker," said the big tough thug heartlessly, as they rode away on their stolen elephant. "What the heaven-sent chance to dump him!" He was beginning to feel a bit better, and laughed a lot at his own joke. "Heaven-sent, get it?" But the experience had been too awful for his small and sinister companion even to summon up a smile. And as they disappeared, the silent bard, still tied up and helpless, heard angry trumpeting. Next moment he saw a vast herd of elephants making its way towards him. Dogmatix stopped, sniffed again, and suddenly turned aside. "I think he's got wind of something else," said Asterix. "I wonder what." Next moment he knew. There was a mighty roar, and a great tawny, striped animal, all claws and fangs, stuck its head out of the bushes. "A royal tiger!" gasped Howdo, dropping to the ground along with Asterix, just as the huge and powerful tiger sprang. Obelix, however, stayed where he was and simply reached out one clenched fist. The enormous tiger collided with it and knocked itself unconscious. Obelix took a look at it. "Royal or not, I don't think it's edible," he said, sadly tossing it over his shoulder just as he had tossed the big tree the day before. "Your friend really is very well trained," said Howdo to Asterix. "Will you swap him for 10 elephants?" "I wouldn't swap Obelix's friendship for all the elephants in the world," said Asterix proudly. It was nothing to Obelix to knock a few poisonous snakes out of the way, too, as the little party went on through the jungle, with Dogmatix back on his original scent and in the lead. "I have an idea. We're on the path to the elephant's graveyard," said Howdo, worried. "If so, your friends had it." "Why?" asked Asterix. "It's the place where old elephants go to die," Howdo told him. "A sacred spot, jealously guarded by the local herds. Woe betide anyone who sets foot there. The elephants will instantly trample him to death." This wasn't exactly cheering, and the jungle became less and less comfortable as coconuts suddenly began falling on the Gauls' heads. "It's those wretched monkeys bombarding us!" exclaimed Howdo. And there was worse to come. Next moment a monkey swung down on a creeper from the top of a tree, grabbed Dogmatix and snatched him away. "Dogmatix!" shouted Obelix. "I can see him," said Asterix. "Look, he's in the monkey's arms at the very top of the tree." Obelix was furious with the mischievous animals. "Stop monkeying about, will you?" he yelled, grabbing the tree trunk and shaking it. Several monkeys and the little dog himself began to fall through the branches. "Here he comes, Obelix!" shouted Asterix. "I'll catch him." And he did. "There you see, Dogmatix," said Obelix, as his dog happily licked his face. "I was thinking of you this time. I remembered how you ate me to pull trees up, so I only shook it." "Swap him for 15 elephants?" murmured Howdo hopefully. Asterix shook his head. "Monkeys, I ask you," said Obelix, aggrieved, as Dogmatix picked up and followed yet another scent. "Why can't they have wild boar in this country, same as anywhere else? And what's this supposed to be?" he inquired in exasperated tones, as he came face to face with the huge rhinoceros whose scent Dogmatix had been following. "A nasty lot you get in these Indian jungles," he added, sending the dazed rhino flying through the air. 20 elephants, said Howdo. "No," said Asterix. "Howdo, you're getting me down." And then at last, Dogmatix located the source of the scent he had originally picked up. An elephant. Howdo's stolen elephant, carrying the big tough thug and the small sinister thug who were in the pay of whodunit. "The Gauls!" they gasped in alarm as Dogmatix barked frantically. "My elephant!" cried Howdo happily. Obelix picked the thugs off the elephant's back and held them in an iron grip, one vast arm round each neck. "Now then, where's our bard?" Asterix asked them. The big tough thug was too terrified to do anything but spill the beans at once. "The guru whodunit told us to take your smelly bard to the elephant's graveyard," he confessed. "He promised to make us stinking rich. I don't know about the rich bit, but we certainly got stinking." That was all the Gauls needed to hear. Next moment the two thugs were flying through the air, just like the tiger and the rhino before them, as Asterix exclaimed, "Quick, Howdo, take us to the elephant's graveyard." "We'll go by elephant," said Howdo, helping the Gauls to get up on the stolen elephant's back. "He'll lead us straight there." As they approached the elephant's graveyard, they saw the mighty grey rear ends of countless elephants, all looking at something in the middle of the great clearing. "This is it," said Howdo. "We'll soon find out if there's anything left of your bard." Howdo's favourite elephant trumpeted. "In nice voice now, isn't he?" said Howdo proudly. And at the sound the other elephants moved aside. The Gauls had feared the worst. What they saw was Cacophonix, the bard, reclining on a big, soft heap of green leaves and eating a banana. Great bunches of bananas lay beside him, and melons and apples and oranges, and all kinds of other fruit that the elephants had picked for him. "Thanks be to Tartarus, he's all right," cried Asterix. "Thanks be to the smell clinging to him, more like," said Howdo, as they put Cacophonix in one of the baskets on the elephant's back, and started home, while the wild herds trumpeted a fond goodbye,
He was lucky. The elephants thought he was one of them, the trainer went on. I knew I had nothing in common with a pachyderm, observed Obelix. Unfortunately, it seemed the bard still hadn't got his voice back. But you're alive, that's the main thing, said Asterix thankfully. However, it was now only 2 hours before 0 hour, and preparations for the sacrifice of Princess Orangeade were already underway. The poor princess was dreadfully worried. What can the Gauls be doing? She asked herself. And where is what's-his-name? Well, we know about the Gauls, and as for what's-his-name, he was still busy with his summit meeting. Which of the 2 fakers would win? What's-his-name? Owsat? It was all still in the air. "Scumber, bring the sky down on your head!" shrieked Owsat, swearing by the cosmic pillar god supposed to support the sky. "Push on, turn you into an old goat!" shouted what's-his-name, swearing by the god of domestic animals. But they weren't even halfway through the 30 million gods yet. This is getting us nowhere, thought what's-his-name. And then suddenly he thought of a way to outwit his rival. He couldn't pass the other flying carpet because of the magic force field. But all at once he sent his own carpet zooming vertically upwards. Taken by surprise, the faker Owsat shot forward on his carpet and stunned himself against the wall of one of the palace towers. Dazed and spinning, he fell to the ground, while his grey and yellow carpet fluttered gently down and settled on top of him. Now what's-his-name was free to go his own way. But it was only 30 minutes to 0 hour now. I must find the Gauls quick, thought what's-his-name. He made for Howdoo's place, where the trainer's favourite elephant was spraying water over the bard to wash off his horrible smell. "See that? My elephant can give you a shower, as well as blowing his own trumpet," boasted Howdoo. Soon the bard was clean, dry, and dressed again. "Thanks and goodbye, Howdoo," said Asterix, shaking hands. "We must be off as fast as we can. We're still going to try to rescue the princess, even though our bard's lost his voice." On the way, they were delighted to see the familiar figure of what's-his-name bringing the blue and gold Persian carpet to a hovering halt just in front of them. "Quick! Jump aboard!" he cried. "We must hurry if we're to rescue Princess Orangeade from the clutches of the evil whodunit." Asterix remembered the gourd of magic potion that Getafix had given him. He took it out, drank some, and handed the gourd on to the bard. "Here, Cacophonix, you take a little magic potion too," he said. "We're going to need all the fighting forces we can muster." It was 5 minutes to 0 hour, and the evil whodunit approached the Rajah and his daughter with a couple of beefy guards. "Better resign yourself, princess," he said. "There's still no rain, so your last hour has come." And despite the Rajah's angry curses on him, whodunit had the princess led away by the 2 guards, and made her climb up on the platform where the block stood. The huge executioner had his axe all ready to behead her. Bravely the princess faced her death. She turned and spoke to the crowd. "May my sacrifice persuade heaven to shower its blessings on you once again," she prayed. "And if by any chance it doesn't, then beware of those serpents who are tricking you for their own evil ends." "Long live our princess who is about to die for us," shouted the crowd, rather unintelligently. "Poor silly idiots," thought whodunit, as the princess laid her head on the block, and he began the countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2... The executioner raised his axe. 1, 0! shouted another voice, as the executioner went flying about half a mile into the air. Asterix, jumping off the carpet, had knocked him there. The carpet itself was now hovering in the air beside the block, and the Gauls helped Princess Orangeade to her feet again. "Are you all right, Princess?" asked Asterix anxiously. "Oh, yes, I knew I was right to trust you," she cried happily. "Quick! I must go and reassure my father the Rajah." Whodunit was simply furious at his interruption of the sacrifice. "Guards!" he yelled. "Seize these blasphemous men!" But before anyone could obey his order,
He was seized by what's-his-name, who was still on the carpet. The faker grabbed his hand and swept him high, high into the air. "Let me go!" shouted the guru. "I order you to let me go!" "Just what I was planning to do," said the faker agreeably, swinging the guru against the side of the tower with which his henchman Auzat had previously collided, and the blue and gold Persian carpet flew away again, as master joined man in a stunned condition on the stones below. Meanwhile, the three Gauls and dogmatics were wading into the guru's guards, just as if they were a bunch of Romans. The guards didn't know what had hit them. "This magic potion really does work wonders, Asterix," said Cacophonix, knocking one of them into the middle of next week. "You said it," agreed Asterix. Then he did a double-take. "Wait a minute. So you did. You're talking again." "Why, so I am," cried the delighted Cacophonix. "It must be the magic potion. And if I'm talking, I can sing too." And flinging his arms wide, he struck up a song by a famous British bard. "Hey, ho, the wind and the rain," he chanted. And to think it only took a little magic potion, thought Asterix. The first raindrop fell on his nose. "For the rain, it raineth every day," warbled the bard. Rain began falling thick and fast over the platform, the block and the dazed guards, who turned tail and fled. "Oh, really?" said Obelix, disgusted. He had hoped they'd put up more fight. "Don't be so wet," he shouted after them. Up on the palace balcony, the Rajah and the princess gazed gratefully at the pouring rain. "The Gaulish miracle!" exclaimed Princess Orangeade. Sure enough, the Gaulish miracle had brought the monsoon season on at last. The crops were saved, the waters of the Ganges rose again, and all the Indians were happy, with a few exceptions, among them Whodunit and Auzat, who took to the air on the grey and yellow carpet as soon as they had regained their senses. They thought it best to get out of the Rajah's way, fast. But theirs was not the happy carpet, as they huddled together in the pouring rain. "Sheer science fiction, that idiot said," muttered Whodunit, glancing darkly at Auzat. "Going to be Rajah instead of the Rajah, that crook said," grumbled Auzat, looking equally darkly at his master. But all was well in the palace, very well. "You have given us so much," said the grateful Rajah. "What can we ever give you in return?" "Something to eat," shouted Obelix, seizing his chance. And the Indians held a banquet for the Gaulish heroes. They sat on cushions instead of at a table, but otherwise it wasn't unlike a Gaulish banquet. And much to Obelix's relief, there was roast wild boar. "You'll be glad to know that the boar is not a holy and therefore inedible animal to us, Obelix," said what's-his-name, as the banquet was served up. "Yum! Scrunch!" went Obelix. "It's a wholly edible animal to me, I can tell you." "I could hear you sing forever, Gaul," Princess Orangeade told Cacophonix. Cacophonix beamed at her. "I wouldn't push your luck, Princess," Asterix warned. "You might get floods as bad as the drought was." "Feeling better now, Obelix?" he asked his friend. But Obelix, though munching his way through a second boar, seemed unaccountably gloomy. "I'm fed up, Asterix. Scrunch," he said. "Fed up? Why?" asked Asterix, in surprise. "Because I've an idea they may be having a banquet in our village at this very moment," said Obelix. "I can almost smell it. And if they are, then they're having it without us. That's why." Obelix obviously had a good nose, almost as good as his dog's, because he was quite right. A few hundred carpet-flying hours from the valley of the Ganges, Chief Vital Statistics was raising his voice and his drinking horn to propose a toast. "And so I drink to our great warriors," he announced. "Our own lads who have gone east to distant lands to bring aid and the image of our great and beautiful Gaulish nation to strangers. And I say to you now, his speech was getting boring again. Some of the villagers started dancing on the table. Others reached for third helpings of ball. Geriatrix turned to the Druid. It's a long time since we had any rain in our village, don't you think, Getafix? Yes, agreed the Druid thoughtfully. Perhaps we ought to hope our bard comes home soon.